told them to do, and therefore it's almost incumbent on the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, to do a written guidance back to the police saying, frankly, stop policing tweets and let freedom of speech stand in our country.
And Chris Hope, as you'd expect, Nigel Farage's detractors today, as always, saying, you know, where is the honourable member for Clacton? He's missing in action once again. But I wonder if that's landing anymore, if that's a glove that's landing on Mr Farage's chin, because Mr Farage will no doubt say this is him on the world stage, setting out the policy, the direction of travel of the United Kingdom, and meanwhile people are banging on about Gaza on the back benches. Would it bother him, that kind of detraction?
The answer to that is simply no, it won't bother him. The way our politics works is because he's a party of just 5 MPs, he is called to speak officially in the House of Commons at PMQs once every 2 months or so. So that allows Labour MPs, as you saw today, to launch an ad hominem attack on Nigel Farage. The Keir Starmer piled in as a Prime Minister, calling him unpatriotic, and normally, frankly, Nigel Farage would sit there just soaking it up. You heard there from Nigel Nelson how Richard Tice mouthed rubbish, but that's all they can do. So he's being attacked in the House of Commons, he can't respond. I think Nigel Farage's response is to go elsewhere and seek an audience, and today he's seeking it in Washington DC. Yes, he's criticised for not being in Clacton enough. He thinks he is in Clacton enough, but also he's trying to raise issues that matter across the pond in America. So yeah, that will definitely be waters off a duck's back. I think the issue, by the way, separate to all that, of Angela Rayner, that one is not going away. I think the pressure now on her and her future is intense. We'll be asking Nigel Farage about that later, about this issue, this admission from her today that she should have paid more tax on that £800,000 flat she bought in Hove.
I think, Chris Hope, actually, we have live pictures from inside that Congress. It hasn't started yet, but I think we can get them up now just to show that it is imminently about to start. These are live pictures. Of course, the testimony is going on from other witnesses today as well. Nigel Farage expected to swoop in soon, running 10 minutes behind schedule. That's the way these things go. We'll be live for the entire duration of what Nigel Farage says, and we'll have full analysis of that back here in Westminster throughout the rest of the day. Chris Hope, we're going to sign off from you for now. Our man in DC, the chopper has landed. We'll cross back to you soon later in the show. Always a pleasure. Let's get back now into the studio. Let's have a quick word with my studio guest first, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, let's quickly talk about that. The notion that, once again, while Nigel Farage is away, they're still talking about him in chamber. They're attacking him, they're lambasting him. Will it matter? Do you think that people in Britain think that you should be at every PMQs, or is this business simply more important?
Well, I mean, I think that when Parliament's returned, especially after a long summer recess, the place for an MP is on the Commons benches. So, yes, really, that Nigel Farage should actually be in the House of Commons. That's where his duty lies as an MP and to his constituents in Clacton. Whether it bothers him or not that Keir Starmer attacks him, I don't know. Certainly Labour now reckon that reform are the real opposition. OK, and do you think that anything that comes out of this Congress meeting today will impact upon Sir Keir Starmer? Quite clearly, the optics here are Nigel Farage is the Trump whisperer. He's our de facto transatlantic bridge, if you like, to the Trump regime. He'll be setting out what he thinks is the most appropriate route of action for Sir Keir Starmer. Do you think Sir Keir Starmer will take any notice of that, or will he try to ignore it? Well, it depends on what Nigel says. But the worrying bit, obviously, is if it impacts the British economy when it comes to trade. OK, and we do have a quick clip, actually, of what the Prime Minister Keir Starmer said at PMQ today when he had that barbed attack on Nigel Farage.
Well, Mr Speaker, of course, the honourable member for Clacton is not here representing his constituencies in the House that he was elected to. No, he's flown to America to badmouth and talk down our country. And worse than that, Mr Speaker, if you can believe it, he's gone there to lobby the Americans to impose sanctions on this country which will harm working people. You cannot get more unpatriotic than that. It's a disgrace.
OK, well, there we go. You cannot get more unpatriotic than that. But while the cat's away, they're certainly playing with Nigel Farage. Let's bring in my other studio guest now, joined by the chief correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Aubrey, a pleasure, as always, to have your company. What do you make of Nigel Farage being in DC? Should he be in Westminster today?
I think Labour are sort of enjoying being able to attack Nigel Farage for once. He's had pretty much all summer with the government vacating the pitch, being able to lay criticism and barbs at the government's door, left, right and centre, and now that he's away, I think Keir Starmer, who was labelled Never Hear Keir for being away on foreign trips during the first sort of 6 months of his presidency, is probably enjoying pointing out the fact that Nigel Farage is in the US yet again. He's wanted to paint himself as this bridge with the Trump administration and the White House, but of course he knows that that relationship is now different and that because Donald Trump is president, they can't see each other quite as regularly. I think there is a concern from Labour people I speak to about the US commenting so frequently on the internal domestic affairs of the UK. It's not something that we do as often, and usually allies respect each other's sort of sovereignty, and leaders don't like to make political comments about what's going on in other people's countries. So there's probably a delicate line here to tread in terms of the relationship between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump.
Apart from when Barack Obama said we'd be at the back of the queue if we voted for Brexit. So people on the left seem to be quite happy when Americans wade in when it suits their agenda. But on a more serious point, Aubrey, is it not a huge headache for Keir Starmer? It's a huge embarrassment to have first JD Vance and now Nigel Farage just going right into the lion's den in DC and pointing out the optics of mothers being sent to prison, for Facebook posts while paedophiles and rapists walk free. Violent criminals being set free from British prisons at a time where there are always space for people who say the wrong things on the internet. And then a comedian being frog-marched into a room by 5 coppers upon landing at Heathrow. This looks terrible, and it's happening on Keir Starmer's watch.
Certainly. I mean, Number 10's initial response was to say that basically this was an operational decision for the police, and the police have basically tried to bat that back and say, OK, look, this decision was taken under legislation that was passed by Margaret Thatcher, the 1986 Public Order Act. But if we are interpreting this in the modern day, and we're being very lightly criticised for this by some senior Labour politicians who've suggested that it shouldn't be the priority or the job of police to go around arresting people for their tweets, then they want political direction, and that seems to still be lacking. So we're going to have to wait and see whether Yvette Cooper, as the Home Secretary, decides to take up Mark Rowley on his suggestion that if politicians want to sit back and criticise some of these decisions, then they should be quite active in terms of dictating what's right and what's wrong, and not just laying it at the door of the police.
Nigel Nelson, this seems to be the constant terminal game of passing the buck. Who's responsible for this, frankly, authoritarian and terrible policing? And Mark Rowley today is saying our officers are in an impossible position. Are they?
Yes.
So who's putting them in this terrible position?
The law is. And so what they're doing is they are upholding...
So who's to blame? Who's responsible?
Well, I mean, Aubrey was talking about a law going back to Margaret Thatcher. What the police were...
You're not blaming Thatcher for Graham Linehan getting arrested. You're not blaming Thatcher for Lucy Connolly being banged up for a Facebook post. Come on, mate.
If you're talking about the Public Order Act, then yes, I am. The point here is that the police were faced with two things. Now, you and I saw Graham Linehan's tweet, and we thought it was a joke. Figuratively, it is a joke. Take it literally, it's inciting violence.
I could murder a Curry. What does that mean?
Well, exactly.
I'd go and murder someone called Curry. It's preposterous.
I know, but
what
I'm saying is the police are therefore acting on the literal interpretation, not the figurative one. So what Mark Rowley is saying, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be doing this. We're put in a completely impossible position to deal with it, but we're upholding the law. The answer here is if there are any charges, the CPS should turn around and say it would not be in the public interest to prosecute, because it wouldn't be.
Well, Graham Linehan is going to sue the Metropolitan Police, we understand. Toby Young is going to be on Farage later. I'm hosting that 7 till 8. He's saying they're going for the Met. They're taking them on. They've had enough of this nonsense.
Well, he's going for the Met on the basis of wrongful arrest. Yeah. The question, obviously, is if that arrest was wrongful, if it was right under the law.
But isn't
it's the law that he's dealing with?
But I'm also having Harry Miller on the show in about an hour's time. Harry Miller took this to the Royal Court of Justice. He himself was arrested over a transphobic limerick. I mean, a transphobic limerick. It was thrown out. He beat the system, and non-crime hate incidents were ruled ridiculous, preposterous and superfluous requirements, but they're still being upheld. That's the point. So no one's listening to recommendations made by the Supreme Court in the Metropolitan Police in Parliament. No one's blooming well listening.
It depends what the offence or the alleged offence actually is. In this case, it was for inciting violence, which was an arrestable offence. So it's a slightly different thing, in the same way that what happened to Graham Linehan is very different from what happened to Lucy Connolly. She was talking about burning hotels down with people in them.
Aubrey, let's bring you in again. I think we've got some live pictures there from Congress. We are still waiting for Nigel Farage to take to the stage, as it were. But rest assured, the moment that comes, we will cross to that. We've got some live pictures now, previous witnesses, as it were, testifying at Congress. They'll come on in a moment. Let's get back to you, Aubrey. We have a problem with the application of law, perhaps the way the law is written itself, overzealous police officers, sometimes crossing the line into activism. We've got an almighty mess, and I fear that day by day the public look at this and just think the law is an ass.
I think this actually, stepping back, reminds me of another row that we had over the summer, which was to do with whether or not police should release the immigration status and the ethnicity or racial identity of suspects who are arrested, including for things like sexual offences. And again, that was an example of politicians, some pundits and commentators basically saying the police had got this wrong, they needed to review how they acted. And I do think that decisions about this are best taken not in the heat of the moment when there's a lot of anger and frustration. In the instance of the row about what information is released about suspects arrested by police, the body that's effectively responsible for issuing the guidance said, we're going to take this away, we're going to review it properly. They're not going to make snap decisions. And I suspect that that's probably what will happen here. Even though people are very upset about what's happened, the best time to change laws is not when you are incredibly angry about them and in the heat of the moment. It's to view it clearly and to make sure that you do things so that they don't have unintended consequences, and that by writing one law to try and change it and improve it, you accidentally create difficulties for yourself further down the line.
But the non-crime hate incident law, you know, this is Harry Miller versus the Crown. This was years ago.
Absolutely.
The recommendation was passed down years ago to get rid of these things. And
Yeah.
it clearly hasn't happened. In the same way, the Supreme Court ruled that a woman is a woman and a trans woman is a biological man. Scientific fact prevailed in British law. That still isn't being upheld by public bodies, by parliamentarians who still can't know. I mean, Nigel Nelson, you still think a woman can have a penis?
Yes, I do, because that is the official position under the Gender Recognition Act, which is still in force despite the Supreme Court ruling. What the Supreme Court did was turn around and said that for equalities purposes, a biological man or a biological woman means just that. Sex is actually biological, doesn't change people changing gender.
But the Supreme Court ruling swept all that to one side.
It didn't. It left the Gender Recognition Act exactly where it was.
It's a piece of paper, but it has no justifiable basis in law.
Yes, it's an act. It's an act of law. The Gender Recognition Act 2004 remains an act of law in this country.
But it won't allow people. It won't allow biological men with a piece of paper to go into a woman's space. Or
No, it won't, because what the Supreme Court judgment did, and in my view quite rightly, is protect women's spaces. That means that people can't complain if a trans woman comes in and they want them out. Various public bodies are now changing their rules to stop people using the spaces.
Reluctantly, there are entire NHS trusts saying we're going to review this. Why are they reviewing it? It's the law.
OK, well, just take a lavatory, for instance. That if you've got gender-neutral lavatories, not unisex lavatories, gender-neutral, which are not proper little cubicles, they have to build new ones to actually cope with it. So there's a whole host of things that hospitals, for instance, would have to go through. But the Supreme Court didn't change the basic principle that if you are a biological man, you can be a woman with a penis and be a woman on your passport and a woman on your birth certificate.
And that, my friend, is an utter farce. And that is the
situation in this country.
And that's back to my basic premise. A lot of people look at this and just think we've crossed the Rubicon into fantasy land. And we've crossed the Rubicon where identity politics and belief systems are now the law. And we're seeing this with these two high-profile cases where it's an application of a belief system which has become reality, because that's what the Supreme Court ruling said. You can believe you're a woman. If you're,
No, you're missing the point, Martin.
I'm not missing the point.
It didn't change the law when it came to gender. That's the whole point about the Supreme Court ruling has been misunderstood as somehow sweeping away all these previous laws. It didn't. They still exist. It may well be that 20 years on we should be looking at them again. But at the moment, the official position in this country is that a biological man can call himself or herself a woman.
Do you think you look back in 20 years' time, at those times you're on national television saying a woman can have a penis and think, that was a bit silly?
You want to hear what my wife says?
Aubrey, let's bring you back in. It's an almighty mess. Let's try and put it back to what's happening on the stage there in DC. We can still see evidence being given out. Politico there holding up some sort of sign. What's that say? Trump says... It's a bit too far away to read. There seems to be an activist behind a speaker there. It's getting a bit frisky already. Let's see, what does that say? Trump... There's an activist behind a speaker holding up signs. They seem to be doing some sort of hijack. It's getting frisky already. They know the world's media is upon them. Aubrey, let's bring you back in. Quite simply, we're waiting... It's a bizarre set of affairs. We can't quite see what's going on, but this certainly is a great build. It's going to be unmissable television. Let's bring it back to the aftermath of today. Sir Keir Starmer would no doubt be handed a set of offerings by what Nigel Farage believes should be done. Certainly, J.D. Vance will be, you'd think, philosophically and legally aligned. No, he wants to defend American big tech. He wants to defend free speech. Will Keir Starmer try and brush it off? Can he brush it off? Because there seems to be a growing tension amongst the public that people get in jail for tweets and Facebook posts is simply getting out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Number 10's response to this has not been to stand full square in support of the police's action and say that what was done was right. They've said that it was an operational decision. Effectively, they've sort of abdicated being able to take a strong position on this. And so that probably suggests that they don't think it's terribly politically popular to stand by completely the arrest in this case. Now, it looks as though some of the headlines that are being held up at that congressional session are suggesting criticisms of how the Trump administration itself has allegedly clamped down on free speech. We can see that there, and it seems to be that some of the headlines are referring to particularly the way that Donald Trump has treated academics and academia as a whole, which is a space where lots of people say there have been infringements on, or certainly attempts to suppress and discourage the free speech of people who are criticising Donald Trump. I suppose, circling back to the UK, one criticism that Keir Starmer can very clearly make of reform is that in Nottinghamshire, their council leader has said to have basically banned the council from interacting with journalists who were accused of writing a negative piece about them. So there will be criticisms made by Labour about reform's own record on freedom of speech in the UK, just as there are criticisms of Donald Trump's administration in the US on that same matter.
I think there's more to that story than meets the eye, by the way. I think the beef that Reform have with Nottingham Life seems to be a much longer-standing one of negativity towards them. That's kind of a separate topic. But you're absolutely right there, Aubrey. There are speakers there talking about Donald Trump's own record on free speech, and they're trying to paint him in a very unflattering light. Look, this is a democratic forum. People are allowed to go there and attack Donald Trump, and that's what they're doing. They're certainly relishing the moment, and that's the reason, audience out there, we are a little late getting to Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage will be watching on from the sidelines, waiting for his moment, and of course, we'll go to that directly live as it happens. In the meantime, thank you, Aubrey. Always a pleasure. Nigel Nelson, you're here for the full 3 hours. It's going to be lively, as ever, on every Wednesday. Thank you, gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure. But it's time now for our latest Great British Giveaway, and it's our biggest prize to date, worth over 104 grand. You could win a 4-berth motorhome worth over £74,000, plus a whopping 30 grand in tax-free cash. And here's Hayley Sparks with all of the details.
It's our biggest, greatest Great British giveaway to date. Your chance to win a prize package worth over £104,000. You could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primero motorhome. With thanks to Marquis Leisure, this 4-berth home from home comes complete with integrated kitchen and bathroom areas, sky view roof light, and has all the tech you'd expect from the latest 2025 model. We'll also give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to to make sure any adventures in your motorhome are taken in style.
For a chance to win the motorhome and cash, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. The winner will be contacted live on GB News, week commencing 10th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. And still to come.
Gone over and above in setting out the details, now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do.
Yeah, earlier today, Keir Starmer defended his deputy PM, Angela Rayner, after she admitted that she should have paid more stamp duty, 40 grand in fact, when purchasing her pad, her third pad down in Brighton. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:31. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now let's cross live now to Washington DC. We've got some live pictures. Nigel Farage expected to take that podium next at US Congress. This is the chair. We're understanding that Nigel Farage is stood up and waiting to get in. The previous speaker overran. There seems to be some blistering attacks on Donald Trump by the previous speaker. And as we understand it, we just hear that the previous speaker was also attacking Nigel Farage for being in Washington. We're waiting for Nigel Farage to take the stage there, centre stage in US Congress in Washington, D.C. When that happens, of course, we'll go straight back and soak up every moment of it. But let's have some analysis now back in the studio here in Westminster. I'm still joined by Nigel Nelson and also been joined by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, ahead of this hugely anticipated moment. Before we get to this, Catherine Forster, perhaps I could ask you about the Angela Rayner situation. You were at PMQs earlier on. This was dropped very shortly before PMQs. It seemed to wrong foot Kemi Badenoch. She perhaps should have gone much more offensively on this, but she didn't. But it's looking pretty grim for Angela Rayner. In fact, she looked uncharacteristically grim herself today at PMQs.
She did. She looked very thin and quite gaunt, I thought. Lucy Powell, the leader of the House of Commons, when Angela Rayner sat down, sort of put her arm around her, gave her a bit of a squeeze. Clearly, this has been very difficult for her. But, you know, we've had days and days of people leaping to Angela Rayner's defence. She's Deputy Prime Minister. She's Housing Secretary. Days of hearing nothing to see here. And now, you know, half an hour before Prime Minister's questions, we learn that there is something to see here, that in fact she has not paid the correct amount of stamp duty on this new flat that she's got in Hove. She's potentially going to have to stump up another £40,000. Now, she says that it's an error, that she was given bad legal advice. She has referred herself to the ethics commissioner who will investigate. We might get a result quite quickly because previously Sir Laurie Magnus investigated Tulip Sadiq, Nadeem Zahari, each took about 8 days. But, you know, if he finds against her, it's difficult for me to see how the Prime Minister can keep her on, especially given how keen she's always been to call out what she's seen as bad behaviour from other people, say, you know, one rule for them, another rule for us. She's always championed herself as a, you know, hard-working girl that's brought herself up through graft and hard work, and that she's there for the workers. I think this is politically quite toxic. Of course, if it's a genuine error and she was given bad legal advice, she might be cleared. This might blow over. I mean, on a personal level, I think you do have to feel for her a bit, in that she does have a disabled child. She says that the home in Greater Manchester was put in a trust to provide for that child. She's divorced from her husband. She'd taken out her whole share from that house in Greater Manchester in her constituency and put that in the house in Hove. And she doesn't own any part of the Greater Manchester house now, which is why she was presumably advised and believed that she could treat the Hove apartment as her main property and so escape £40,000 of stamp duty. But, you know, as Housing Secretary, shouldn't she have checked and double-checked and triple-checked that this was in fact correct, given how serious this now looks?
And I wonder if this is, I think you're exactly right, this is Angela Rayner, who's been entirely and unremittingly unforgiving of any error or mistake by any Conservative ever. That's the point. She's never shown an ounce of remorse towards a Conservative in the past. And in particular, I think we have a clip we can show where previously in 2023, she demanded the resignation of Nadeem Zahawi at the time over his tax affairs. We'll get that ready and we'll show it in a moment. And basically she was saying, Nigel Nelson, after months of denials, the truth emerges. His position is untenable. Rishi Sunak must dismiss him from his cabinet. And you and I spoke about this story on Monday when it appeared that nothing untoward had happened. That possibly might have changed. Let's just take a look at Angela Rayner's clip. Back in 2023, calling for the head of a Conservative.
Every pound tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services, and we know the state they're in. So the former Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately, and was threatening legal letters to anyone that questioned him. Now it emerged actually that that's not true, and that there was a HMRC investigation and that he's had to pay penalties for that. I think that makes his position untenable.
There you have it. I think that's the point, Nigel Nelson. That the sanctimony, the hypocrisy, the double standards. That's the number one thing people hate in politics above everything else.
Yep, no, I agree with you entirely. I mean, Angela Rayner did do a lot in opposition, calling for people's heads, and it probably wasn't advisable to go and do it. I mean, the clip you've shown is obviously specifically on tax, and that's what she's got herself involved in now. Whether or not she survives, I think depends on two things. As Catherine has just said, it depends on Sir Laurie Magnus, the ethics advisor, what he comes up with, also HMRC. So that she's got to do a deal with HMRC about paying the tax that she owes, whether it's 40,000 or a bit less. HMRC may take a different view about the way that it was avoided. So it all comes down to, if you take Angela Rayner's explanation, she got bad advice. It was a very complex situation with trusts involved, the court saying that she couldn't even talk about it because there was an action out there. So it's been a difficult one. It is complicated, but the question is, did she make a genuine mistake, and will Laurie Magnus uphold that?
OK. Let's just have a quick recap on what was said earlier on by the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, when she admitted that she should have paid more tax on a second home and has referred herself to the standards watchdog.
When I purchased it, I relied on the advice that I received from lawyers. Therefore, it's obviously not my main residence, and therefore I paid the additional premium because it isn't my main residence, even though I only own one property. There are very different rules to council tax as they are to the rules around stamp duty, etc. But I took and relied on that advice
was wrong,
and that advice was wrong.
There you go. So she's blaming bad advice. Certainly, I would think that the people who gave her that advice would have something to say about that. Will they accept that that advice was bad? Because if it's true, that's the death of them as a source of legal advice. So this one is going to run, and it came as a great shock to the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says his deputy has done the right thing, and he was very proud to sit alongside Angela Rayner.
I remember when the Prime Minister said that tax evasion is a criminal offence and should be treated as all other fraud. If he had a backbone, he would sack her.
Let's get back to my panel now. Catherine Forster, isn't this the point? It's one that people just perceive to be double standards. This is the Housing Minister. And by the way, can I just say something personally? I'm getting a bit sick of Angela Rayner, a working-class hero, being used as defence. I come from a working-class background. I just don't like it when people bend the rules. And I just don't think it's acceptable. It's like, oh, she's working class, she's a hero, as if she should be forgiven for that. Actually, she seems to be acting in many ways here like the people that she perceives to call scum, conservative. She's acting like a conservative in terms of the planning, the wealth planning. And I just think that's the problem here. It gets to a point where even if there's no legal transgression, there's nothing illegal happened, people just think this kind of thing stinks.
Yeah, and the charge will be that this is the height of hypocrisy because she is Housing Secretary. We know that Rachel Reeves is looking at potentially all sorts of tax rises on properties. Homeowners will be very worried about those. And here we have the Housing Secretary that's got some sort of trust arrangement going on for her disabled child. Now, of course, that is totally within the rules, and in fairness to her, there was this court order apparently of confidentiality about the arrangements over the last couple of years, which meant that she's had that lifted now so she can talk about it. But it reminds me too, it's only just over a year ago, there was another big row, not on this scale, but it's still a big row, loads of lingering questions over, I think it was council tax in properties up north about Angela Rayner. And I was at a press gallery lunch. We never really got to the bottom of it. The line was always, everything's been done correctly. We never really got to the bottom of it. The press didn't, presumably because of this court order that we didn't know about. But at this lunch, she was asking for privacy, and she was on the verge of tears, and she was saying, I've got a disabled child. This has been very difficult for my family. Now, that might all be the case, but the bottom line is you've got a very big job in politics, and when you're going to be in opposition and constantly call people out, then you can expect the same to come back from you when you're Deputy Prime Minister.
OK, we're going to go straight now to Washington, D.C. Nigel Farage has taken the stage.
Timely.
I'm delighted to reacquaint with the charming Mr. Raskin. That was delightful testimony you gave me earlier on with your speech. But hey, that's fine. You can say what you like. I don't care. Because that's what free speech is. And in a sense, this has all been going wrong now for a couple of decades. We've kind of forgotten the Voltairean principles that we'll fight and defend to the death your right to say something that we fundamentally disagree with. That is the absolute foundation, if you think about it, of free speech, of democracy, of living in freedom. It's kind of why we fought 2 world wars at massive, massive cost to defend that very principle for ourselves and for many, many others around the country. And I first became worried about all this with cancel culture. You know, the idea that we can't have this speaker go to a university because some people might be offended by what he or she have to say. It is important to note that there is not a parent in the United Kingdom, and I would guess it's the same for America too, that is not concerned about content their children as minors can find on the internet. Not a single parent that is not concerned about this. But at the moment, we're not finding the right solutions. I do myself begin to think that hardware might be one of the solutions. That laptops, that handsets could be programmed so that many, many apps and many, many services simply aren't available from these devices. But what we've done is to go down the legislative route. And it's extraordinary that, you know, I come from the land of Magna Carta, I come from the land that gave us the mother of parliaments, and it doesn't give me any great joy to be sitting in America and describing the really awful authoritarian situation that we have now sunk into. J.D. Vance did us all a service at the Munich Security Conference back in February this year. He really got this debate up and running, and it's a vital one. We've run on since then. The Online Safety Act was put in place by the last Conservative government. I don't doubt for a minute they're good intentions, but sometimes the road to hell is paved with those good intentions. And we are now where we are. We have a couple of very famous cases. We, of course, have Lucy Connolly, who put out an intemperate tweet after the savage murder of those 3 beautiful young girls, she herself, a mother who had lost a child. It was intemperate, it was wrong, but she removed it 3.5 hours later, sentenced to 31 months in prison. She's now out, having served 40% of the time. I wanted to bring her with me today as living proof of what can go wrong. Sadly, the restrictions that have been put on her banned her from making the trip, which is a very, very great shame. And we, of course, have the extraordinary events that we understood yesterday of Graham Linehan, the comedic writer, and he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona, and months later he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. Armed police, not a big deal in the USA, a very big deal in the United Kingdom. 5 of them. And he was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen. He's an Irish citizen. This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on rollout effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. So I've come today as well to be a klaxon, to say to you, don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you would be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago at Heathrow Airport. This is a genuinely worrying, concerning and shocking situation, and I thank you for the opportunity to come here today.
Thank you, Mr. Well said. Thank you, Mr. Farage. Professor Kaye, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Raskin, members of the committee.
Okay, that was Nigel Farage's opening gambit there. The rules of engagement are each speaker gets a 5-minute turn to set up what they are about to speak about in their main menu later. But even within that 5 minutes, it's fair to say, there were some blistering bombshells delivered. Let's have a quick recap of what Nigel Farage just said there in this historic address to US Congress and the House Judiciary Committee. He said the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He pointed out the case of Lucy Connolly, of course, put out an intemperate tweet. He said it was wrong, it was intemperate. She removed it hours later, sentenced to 31 months in prison. I wanted to bring Lucy Connolly with me today, Nigel Farage said. But restrictions on her movements prevented that. So clearly Lucy Connolly legally is not allowed to leave the country, not allowed to talk about this case in America. Graham Linehan then pointed out, tweeted months ago, in America, and he's not even British, Nigel Farage points out. He's an Irishman. And then I think made a very clever twist and pivot, saying this could happen to any American, pointing out here that British police officers arrested somebody who isn't even British, Graham Linehan, of course, being an Irish citizen, but it could, therefore, by implication, happen to anybody, including Americans. Then this story in the press over here about potential sanctions, a potential action from America towards the United Kingdom. This kind of action, Nigel Farage said, could damage trade between US and the UK, and you'll be doing yourselves a big favour if you tell the British government this has to stop and they made a mistake. Today is a day to draw a line in the sand, he said. And then he finished off with that final flurry. At what point do we become North Korea? I think Graham Linehan found that out yesterday. And that was the closing gambit. And Nigel Farage exited to return later on. A huge amount said there, and gasps back here in Westminster in the studio from my panellists, Catherine Forster, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, I'm going to come to you first, because when Nigel Farage mentioned North Korea there, you audibly gasped.
I did. I think that is just hyperbole. It really is going too far. We're not North Korea. I mean, North Korea is a completely closed society you can't even get into. And you've got labour camps. They treat a lot of people like slaves. Britain is hardly North Korea. And I know that Nigel's just said it. The Daily Mail said it this morning. We're not. It doesn't mean things can't be improved, and that is obviously what he's talking about there with the Online Safety Act. Trouble is, he hasn't come up with anything as an alternative to the Online Safety Act that will continue to protect children from suicide sites, self-harm sites and hardcore pornography.
Yeah, but I think the point of the resistance to the Online Safety Act from people like Nigel Farage, and by the way, a lot of people across the free speech arena, not just Nigel Farage, is that it simply has overreach. It allows, for example, tweets to be taken down if you say inflammatory things, for example, about hotel protests. A lot of social media posts have been taken down under the guise of a well-meaning piece of legislation. How often do we see a sniper rifle turn into a blunderbuss? Yeah. And so that's the point. It's not correct to say that Nigel Farage or anybody who opposes the Online Safety Bill wants it done because they want to endanger children or compare him somehow grotesquely to Jimmy Savile.
No, but you have to replace this with something if you want to control it. Those tweets you're talking about being taken down, they're taken down by the social media platform, and that's because they haven't quite sorted out themselves what this law actually means to them.
But that's the point, it's overreach. It allows the interpretation of a law in a way that many people think is simply censorious.
And which they overinterpreted. And as things calm down, I'm pretty sure you won't find some of those things taken down that are being taken down at the moment. It's the way the social media companies operate. And I'm also sure that they quite
I don't think this gives the government or the police or Ofcom powers to simply remove content they don't like.
No,
that's what's happening now.
The powers are there for harmful content, not for content people don't like.
OK, well, look, let's go back to Congress now, because earlier, before Nigel Farage took to the stage, Jamie Raskin, he's a congressman representing Maryland's 8th Congressional District, he slammed Nigel Farage, saying he wants to shut free speech down, and he even mentioned this channel, GBNews.
Now, Mr. Trump and Mr. Farage both claim they're protectors of free speech, but they only want to protect speech they...
Well, that clip wasn't quite primed. I was desperate to hear that. We're definitely going to get back to that because GB News was slagged off in Congress. This is beautiful. Catherine Fawcett, we have got it now. Let's get to it.
Now, Mr. Trump and Mr. Farage both claim they're protectors of free speech, but they only want to protect speech they agree with. In the UK, Mr. Farage is openly promoting the abolition of the Human Rights Act of 1998 to be replaced with a British Bill of Rights that limits the right of free speech to British citizens and legally sanctioned residents. He complains that racist threats against immigrants are not protected free speech, while he proposes to strip migrants, tourists, and perhaps even visiting American congresspeople of any free speech rights at all. I had my own close encounter with that when Mr. Farage and his team presented for more than an hour in a conversation we had about free speech. And after 3 minutes of talking, he cut me off and terminated the meeting because he didn't like what I was saying. That's the kind of free speech he's committed to. There is a free speech crisis in America today, but there's no free speech crisis in Britain. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has not shut down GBNews, where Mr. Farage has his own show, just because Mr. Farage has used his airtime to call for banning peaceful protests that he disagrees with.
Beautiful. Jamie Raskin there getting into a complete lather about Nigel Farage and GB News, saying Sir Keir Starmer hasn't closed down GB News. At least not yet. Look, this is an epic day in Washington. It's going to be superb here. Back in London, Nigel Farage, we believe, due to go back to give more evidence later on. We'll be here throughout the entire show covering that, and we're going to grab an interview with Nigel Farage himself when he finally finishes. An epic day ahead, both in Washington and for reaction back here in London. Please stick with us here on GB News. I'm Martin Daubney. This is the People's Channel. First, here's your weather.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. An unsettled day ahead with multiple Met Office warnings issued, rain and heavy showers for many, and a fairly windy day on offer across the south. And it's all thanks to low pressure pushing in from the west, dragging in frontal systems, and also a fair few isobars on the chart across the south and southeast. So a very blustery day here, heavy outbreaks of rain pushing into southeast England, East Anglia, along with those strong blustery winds. A chance we could see some heavy showers behind this with a risk of some thunderstorms. Also heavy outbreaks of rain pushing into eastern parts of Scotland, northeastern England. Perhaps a little brighter in the west, but still plenty of blustery showers here. Highs reaching around 22 degrees Celsius, but feeling a little cooler in the strong winds, particularly around exposed coasts. Long, heavy outbreaks of rain eventually pushing their way into the North Sea, lingering on for a time across eastern parts of Scotland. Once again, still some strong winds remaining here. As I say, turning a little brighter perhaps across Northern Ireland, but still a chance of some heavy showers. And elsewhere across England and Wales, it's likely there's still going to be plenty of lingering clouds, still very blustery through across English Channel coasts, and still with a chance of some showers feeding in through from the west. Any outbreaks of rain eventually clearing, still a few showers lingering on, particularly western coasts, before once again we see heavy blustery outbreaks of rain start to push their way into parts of Devon and Cornwall, southern parts of Wales. So another damp start ahead as we head our way into Thursday morning. But elsewhere, some clearer skies, which means it will turn a little cooler for some, but still some showers lingering on across northwestern areas of the country. Still all eyes to the south once again, a heavy band of rain pushing its way northeastwards, pushing into central parts of England, parts of the southeast by the time we reach the afternoon. This too could see some heavy downpours and also some thundery outbreaks. Elsewhere, a day of sunshine and showers and fairly similar temperatures, lighter winds by the afternoon, highs reaching around 21, possibly 22 degrees Celsius.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Access to the M74 southbound junction 1 and the M8 eastbound junction 22 from the M77 northbound is restricted due to a road traffic incident. Motorists should exercise caution and allow extra time on their journey. Additionally, the M4 eastbound between junctions 15 and 14 has experienced an accident, closing 2 of 3 lanes until later today. In Northamptonshire, a broken-down vehicle affects the M1 northbound between junction 16 and junction 18, closing 1 of 4 lanes temporarily. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast between Watford Junction and Milton Keynes Central is delayed. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
It's our biggest Great British giveaway to date. You could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This 4-berth home from home comes complete with integrated kitchen and bathroom areas and has all of the tech you'd expect from the latest 2025 model. We'll also give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that any adventures you take in your new motorhome are taken in style. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good afternoon to you on an action-packed afternoon. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Moss and Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, earlier today, Nigel Farage has begun testifying at the US Congress in Washington, D.C., where he has already blasted Keir Starmer for putting free speech in grave peril. He compared the United Kingdom to North Korea. Will Donald Trump respond with stinging sanctions? We'll be live from DC for all of this unmissable spectacle. And here's what he said earlier. OK, we'll have that in a moment. Just before Mr Farage spoke, he was accused of hypocrisy and the protector of free speech by one US politician. And GB News was even mentioned.
But there's no free speech crisis in Britain. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has not shut down GB News, where Mr Farage has his own show, just because Mr Farage has used his airtime to call for banning peaceful protests that he disagrees with.
So Keir Starmer shutting down GB News. Don't give the Prime Minister any ideas. Now, meanwhile, back in 2023, Angela Rayner demanded Tory Minister Nadhim Zahawi resign over his tax affairs.
The Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately. I think that makes his position untenable.
Well, now Miss Rayner's admitted to dodging a 40 grand stamp duty bill. Ought she to follow her own advice? If it's good for the goose, is it good for the Rayner? Should Rayner resign immediately? Mother Lucy Connolly jailed for a Facebook post. Comedian Graham Linehan arrested for trans tweets. A Tony Blair-backed digital ID is now incoming. On today's show, I'll be joined by free speech warrior Harry Miller, who will echo what Nigel Farage just said in Congress. Is Britain turning into North Korea? And the Labour Party has lost control of Rushmore Council after 4 Labour councillors last night dramatically quit the party in unison. The shock split comes off the back of months of asylum hotel protests in the area. I'll be joined by the council's Tory leader who says Labour are finished. And that's all coming throughout the rest of the show. Prime Minister needs to admit he's got things wrong. He needs to apologise. Those were the words of Nigel Farage in Congress there in Washington, D.C. a short moment ago. He compared the United Kingdom to North Korea, pointing out that Graham Linehan was arrested at Heathrow Airport for tweets he made in America as an Irishman. He's not even British and was arrested by the British police. Nigel Farage pointed out that could happen to any American citizen. Do we have a free speech crisis? Britain under the microscope. Nigel Farage leading the charge. We'll be live from Washington, D.C. throughout the rest of the show to get back to those unmissable pieces of evidence. Get in touch the usual way, gbnews.com/you'll say. Do you believe the UK is turning into North Korea? But before all of that, it's time for headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Just after 4 o'clock, well, the top story this hour, Angela Rayner has admitted she did underpay stamp duty on a flat purchase and has referred herself to the ethics watchdog. She says her complex family situation led to initial legal advice suggesting the standard rate applied, but later counsel confirmed more tax was due. The Telegraph had claimed she avoided £40,000 by removing her name from the deeds of another property. Well, Angela Rayner has said since that she deeply regrets the error.
It's been quite a distressing time for my family. I have a court order that was in place around confidentiality regarding my son, my family and my divorce proceedings that happened in 2023, and therefore wasn't able to give a full account of the circumstances of our complex living arrangements. That order was lifted last night. I applied to have that order lifted so that I could give people the information.
Well, at Prime Minister's questions this afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer gave his full backing to his deputy, saying he was very proud to sit alongside her. But the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch called for Rayner to be sacked.
I think the revelations about Angela Rayner's tax affairs are extraordinary, and if the Prime Minister had a backbone, he would have sacked her by now. Her position is untenable. Many people out there have very difficult personal circumstances. The bottom line is that Angela Rayner and the whole of the Labour cabinet are trying to raise taxes for everyone else, while at the same time we see her trying to avoid paying her own taxes. Keir Starmer himself has said that tax evasion should be treated as a criminal offence. He needs to apply the same standards to his own front bench, otherwise it is hypocrisy.
The Chancellor has now set the date for her first budget, the 26th of November. Rachel Reeves faces a £41 billion shortfall, fuelling speculation about property tax rises to plug the gap. The Conservatives are piling on the pressure with a Commons vote demanding Labour rule out new levies on family homes, inheritance or capital gains. Shadow Housing Secretary Sir James Cleverly insists a family home is not a piggy bank to raid. Opening a debate earlier, Sir Mel Stride warned nothing is safe. Labour will tax the living daylights out of your family. But ministers say they won't respond to any speculation. And we'll take a brief pause from the headlines, take you straight back to Washington, where Nigel Farage is continuing to speak.
Adapted over centuries, and your founding fathers looked at the best bits that we had.
It appears in Europe and in the UK, free speech is whatever the bloody members think it is at a given time, and it changes with the will of the people they elect. Is that right?
Yes, but I don't think at any point we've really had a proper debate about infringement of free speech until COVID. And I think COVID changed the game.
Okay.
I think the government, social media platforms, big media, suddenly there were arguments that needed to be made that were banned.
So, Mr. Reid, to your knowledge, and I would go to the professor, but he seems to be ill-informed even on our own governor's lawsuits. First Amendment. In the United States, you can sue for anything. Do you often win if you sue against institutions like Fox, Wall Street Journal? Isn't it true that effectively the First Amendment creates a tremendous shield against anything except malicious, deliberate lies?
Not my area of expertise. We can absolutely talk about apps, but as an American, yes, that is absolutely my understanding.
And you have no such protection, just the opposite. You have no idea in Europe or in Britain about what is going to be allowed or not allowed. In other words, you don't know where to call balls and strikes. You just simply have to pay the fines when you get to them.
Well, I only carry one passport, so I'm more aware of the American laws, but that is my understanding correct.
Okay, now, we do have a First Amendment, and we are a signatory to Article 19. So I'm going to go a little bit into opinion. Now, I'm the author of No Censorship on Our Shores, meaning, Mr. Price, I know you're familiar with it, I'm not going to tolerate censorship overseas and then have those people come to the United States. Now, Professor Kay may object to the idea that I'm not going to let people who have been involved in censorship come into the United States because I think it's unacceptable to get away with that overseas. But let's be reciprocal for a moment for Mr. Reid and for everyone. If we're seeing Europe and the UK and other countries stifle what we are guaranteed in the U.S., and particularly arrest somebody for what they said while on U.S. soils, shouldn't this administration be just as strong and reciprocal that we will not tolerate that activity even off our shores? And isn't that ultimately what the United States must make available to the world, essentially guarantee the First Amendment to anyone, anywhere, if they want to do business with the United States? Mr. Price.
The leadership of the United States on this issue has been transformative for the discussion in Europe. And from the President, Secretary Rubio, and the Vice President, they have transformed the issue, and I hope more comes.
So, to the fringe parliamentarian, as you were called, and probably the future Prime Minister, what say you?
Yes, for Mr. Nadler's benefit, it's a very big fringe, and we're doing rather well, but there we are. Look, you know, if you were to follow, Mr. Eisler, the logic of your argument that you were to ban people from entering America who would pass legislation that was prejudicial against American companies or American citizens and would threaten them with potential arrest if they came across the other side of the pond. I think the practical difficulty with that is you'd have to ban the British government, the entire Labour Party. So I'm not sure in practical terms that it works, but I understand the sentiment.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me be clear. I am not here to defend the European laws, and I've often criticized the approach of European countries to internet-related issues. It's really generally wrong-headed. But I don't really think that's the point of this hearing. I think the real threat to the First Amendment isn't coming from Europe. It's coming from Republican-led states that have introduced bills to close the open internet, and most of all, from Donald Trump, who's actively trampling free speech here at home. I think it's rather absurd for this committee to spend...
Okay, that was Nigel Farage there giving his second tranche of testimony, of evidence there at the House Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C. We will return and dip in and out as Mr. Farage speaks and react to what he says back here in Westminster. But let's just recap now, because earlier on the Reform UK leader has been addressing the House Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C., where he's been warning of a rise in censorship in the UK. And here's a bit of what he had to say a little earlier on.
This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on roll-out effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. So I've come today as well to be a klaxon, to say to you, don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you would be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea?
Well, incendiary stuff already there from Nigel Farage in Washington, D.C. And let's go to our man in Washington, D.C. That's GBNews political editor Chris Hope, who's there live for us in the heart of democracy. Chris Hope, right from the first smash from the wicket there, Nigel Farage came out swinging, talking about Lucy Connolly, about Graham Linehan, not even being a British citizen, implying, of course, then this could happen to any American. And that dramatic finale saying that the United Kingdom is turning into North Korea. It's already been sensational stuff.
Yes, Martin, welcome back. I'm outside the Rayburn building behind me, which is where Nigel Farage is giving evidence to the House Judiciary Committee. And that's right. I think that the centre point of what Nigel Farage is arguing, clearly, is that he sees a degree of overreach by UK authorities. How is it that in the case of Mr Linehan, he can tweet something as an Irish person in America and then get arrested by 5 gun-wielding police when he arrives at Heathrow yesterday? How is that right? He wasn't even in Britain, by all accounts, when these tweets were written by this comedic writer. And that's why it's so important, and that's why it cuts right through to Article 1 of the US Constitution, the right to freedom of speech. And that's indeed why J.D. Vance, the US Deputy, the Vice President, has said what is going on in Europe. And I think we are seeing change here. We're seeing Mark Rowley, who's the Met Police Chief, he's saying to the Home Secretary, give us some guidance here. Our police are doing their best, they're rank and file officers. If there's a complaint to the police, if there's a law passed by MPs, we have to investigate, and that can lead to arrests. But if this now is seen as ridiculous, to arrest people for remarks, however intemperate, made on social media, is it time to pull back from that? But to do that, the pressure's back on Yvette Cooper to ensure that some guidance is given to police. It hasn't all gone, of course, Nigel Farage's way. He's been branded a Putin-loving, free speech imposter and Trump sycophant by Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin. And that's because even here, politics is alive to Nigel Farage's relationship and links to Donald Trump. So you'll have Democratic representatives in that house behind me. They will use the opportunity to beat up Nigel Farage because the real target for them, of course, is Donald Trump.
And Chris Hope, it was fascinating then how Mr Raskin turned his guns on GB News. He said it's not as if there's a free speech crisis in the United Kingdom. Sir Keir Starmer hasn't closed down GB News. And I was screaming, don't give the Prime Minister any ideas, Chris Hope. Let's not go down that route. But also a fascinating point that Nigel Farage made a short moment ago in his second tranche of evidence. He was asked when this free speech crisis, in his opinion, began. And he mentioned a fascinating point. He said during COVID. He said COVID changed the game. Arguments needed to be made, but couldn't be made, clearly alluding there to what many people at the time felt was an authoritarian, top-down clampdown on free speech on social media by the authorities.
That's right. He's alluding, I think, there to the fact that anyone who questioned the efficacy of the COVID vaccine was shut down. And, of course, that is a big issue. That's where the freedom of speech pressure came. I just wonder whether we've crossed this moment. I think this Graham Linehan arrest, as I say, for tweeting things from America as an Irish person, but someone in the UK has made a complaint. I think that could be the moment when we get some form of reaction from number 10 and the government. We had heard yesterday how they don't want the police to be policing Twitter, and now we've got Mark Rowley saying, give us that in writing, Home Secretary, and I can tell my police officers. Now, earlier, of course, Sir Keir Starmer used the fact that Nigel Farage is here in Washington to go to attack him again. He said that Nigel Farage wants the US on working people by bringing in the issue of freedom of speech. That is not what Nigel Farage said, but the attack on Nigel Farage was strong from Keir Starmer. You cannot get more unpatriotic than that, said Sir Keir Starmer. It's a disgrace. And of course, Nigel Farage denies that. He says he merely wants companies doing business with Britain to make the case for freedom of speech. And hopefully, when he leaves the building behind me, I'll grab him for an interview live on your show, Martin.
Great stuff, Chris. As I've got you there, I just want to ask you about that fact that Mr. Farage is in that building behind you, but is still the talk of the town, and that building behind me in Parliament over there. Will any of that bother him? I mean, because he's out there ostensibly laying down the law to the American institution, but American big tech, the corporations worth billions of dollars, will be watching this and thinking, hang on a minute. If somebody who isn't even British can make a statement on one of our platforms and they get their collar felt the moment they land in Britain, there's a business and a reputational impact. And this will, I think, make people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and the whole lot of them stand up and go, what on earth is going on here? And maybe that will force some kind of intervention from Donald Trump. And it will, as you're dead right, Yvette Cooper will have to do something.
Well, that's what I think. I think the story's moved today. Mark Rowley is force in the country, the de facto head of our police in the UK. He's saying, just give our police some guidance here. I mean, I personally don't really blame the police. They have to enforce the law passed by MPs. If there's a complaint made, they look into it. If there's apparently prima facie issue with the law, they then may make an arrest. Of course, Graham Linehan will plead not guilty and there'll be a court case to go through. But that's why I think it's so important, I think, that there's some guidance here from the Home Secretary. If now we are saying that you can't be policed for what you say on Twitter, that's a freedom of speech issue, it needs the Home Secretary to make that clear in writing to police officers, and then these big issues may die away. For Nigel Farage, he won't mind being criticised by the Prime Minister in PMQs. Yes, of course, he's being talked about again, even when he's not there. He knows that he gets very little chance to make an impact in Parliament because he's a tiny party, just 5 MPs. He can speak, I think, once every 2 months as a party leader. So he's going around the world making his own news. And, of course, that's why...
OK, Chris, we have to interject because Nigel Farage is speaking again in that building behind you. Let's get back to Nigel Farage.
That some trusted flagger approved by the government, the same government that says what's being said at the Democrat National Committee, we need to take back our country, is hate speech, that's a scary scenario. Is that right?
Yeah, they're massive statistics. And I mean, some of it comes under non-crime hate incidents. So you've said something on social media, someone's taken objection, and you get the knock at the door from the police sort of warning you that if you do this again, something may happen. And this has now been broadened out. I mean, Mr. Price made the point, what is hate speech? How do you define hate speech? And that's the problem, isn't it, with all of these laws, that we finish up in a position where local police forces, etc., have to choose their own interpretations. I think, again, as I said to you earlier, the timing of this hearing today is perfect because the head of the Metropolitan Police, who arrested Graham Linehan at Heathrow Airport. Yeah. He's thrown the ball back now to the British Home Secretary and the government to say, please tell us, what is this law intended? What are we supposed as the police to do? So I think we're going to have a much more rapid debate about this. But my worry is it may get worse, if I may quickly. Because the Labour government now are intending to pass a law that has a definition of Islamophobia. They're intending to put that into law. And that effectively will mean that criticism of a religion, mocking of a religion, would become an offence. And that's totally against everything. Well, because we've always given the Pope a hard time. We've always given the Archbishop of Canterbury a hard time. So we're finishing up kind of with two-tier law and two-tier justice.
Well,
and that's very concerning.
I had one other question I'd like to give for maybe you and Mr. Price, if I could. Speaking of religion, tell me what performative prayer is. This is something we've seen and we've discovered in our investigative work. Maybe we'll start with Mr. Price, then go to Mr. Farage.
Yes, sir. We have a client at the moment who's been prosecuted or was arrested in Bristol for a Christian pastor preaching about the differences between Christianity and Islam. He was then assaulted by a group of people identifying as Islamic people. The police arrived and they arrested him, not the people who assaulted him. This is the state of play in the United Kingdom in terms of free speech. And unfortunately, across Europe, I mean, I have a whole file of cases here where people have been arrested for criticisms of Islam, where they've been prosecuted. Things are getting pretty bad.
Yeah, that extends to abortion clinics, doesn't it? And the abortion debate in Britain and Europe is different to the abortion debate in America. It's in a different place. But we have seen people warned or arrested if they've been seen to be praying outside abortion clinics, even if they're doing it silently. Hence, it's performative in the sense they're doing that. And you know, I'm afraid you now have to be a certain distance away from one of these clinics. But if other members of the public object and say that your praying there is causing them psychological harm, well, the police may intervene.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment on one of these issues, just very briefly?
I'm fine if the ranking member, okay. I may have to ask you a question after you comment. When you do that, go ahead.
I realize I'm opening the door.
Yeah.
I just wanted to note on this question of what is hate speech. First off, the question of identifying hate speech is not something that happens in a vacuum. In the UK, in Europe, there are very strict rules around the definition of hate speech that connect it not merely to speech, but to incitement. So it's incitement to violence or hatred or discrimination. And I think that's just an important baseline point, that this isn't just about pure speech, it's about the kind of speech that might lead to violence. And related to that, when you mentioned this hypothetical of take back our country, and is that hate speech? My understanding is that that came up in the context of a hypothetical related to persistent harassment of a Muslim girl. And that was the hypothetical. And the question was, in that particular context, did that constitute a kind of incitement to some violence against this young girl? So I think it's important to put some of these kinds of abstract questions into that kind of context.
Professor, did you agree with the Biden administration when they established the Disinformation Governance Board?
I didn't take a position on that. I do think that disinformation is an issue that
the government should be deciding what we can say and what we can't?
Absolutely not.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'll give the ranking member a little extra time if he so desires. With that, I'll recognize the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And firstly, I was pleased to join on the Codell. It was a very fine, good Codell. I appreciate the chair, my friend and my classmate from 2006. One of the things I found most heartening about the Codell, we had a tour of Parliament, and along with us were two conservative members who were, I think they were either in the House of Lords, maybe one was in the Lords and one was in the House of Commons, but they talked to us about Magna Carta and about how it's the basis of our laws, and there was a copy there and copies here and there and whatever, but how precious the Magna Carta is. And they suggested to us that a legislator, this was in the House of Lords where he spoke, that a legislator is not somebody who votes. A legislator's job is not just to vote. A legislator's job is to stand up to an out-of-control executive. Very telling for British Parliament members to instruct us on what we should be doing. I thank him for that. I'm a strong supporter of free speech and always have been, but I find this hearing a bit disingenuous because of the problems we have here in America. Free speech includes the speech of those with whom we disagree, people who say vile things, and in my case, I find racist and anti-Semitic and Islamophobic type speech is something I find foul, but it's protected by free speech and offensive speech as well. That does not mean that there aren't limitations, however, and speech can be harmful, dangerous, and infringe on other people's rights. It isn't a free-for-all, though. And the U.S. and our First Amendment does not have a monopoly on what constitutes free speech. There is speech protected by the First Amendment, like corporate political donations, which I think is misplaced and misapplied. And there are times when our legal system itself suppresses disfavored speech. I passed the Speech Act in the 111th.
Okay, while we're waiting for Nigel Farage to come back in, we'll be dipping in and out of this historic Congress testimony there in Washington, D.C. As Nigel Farage returns, we're just going to react back here in the studio to some of the astonishing revelations coming out of that testimony from Nigel Farage. I'm joined in the studio by GBNews' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Nigel Nelson, we heard earlier on Nigel Farage blasting Sir Keir Starmer on our trajectory towards North Korea.
Yes.
We disagreed on that. He mentioned how things changed during COVID. We're going to disagree on that, but something that really leapt out a short while ago, he brought to the attention, perhaps for the first time, certainly in America and the world's media, about Labour's new definition of Islamophobia, something that you and I have discussed a lot. It's a hugely contentious area. Many people believe it will give protection to Islam. It will allow Islamists to say any criticism of Islam is Islamophobia. Nigel Farage there said quite clearly, this will make mocking religion an offence. He said we have a proud heritage of mocking the Pope, of mocking other religions, but he said Labour's new definition of Islamophobia will effectively give a two-tiered law protection towards Islam. A lot of people agree with that. You don't.
I don't, because we don't know what it is yet. That's been the problem. We've got an international definition of anti-Semitism that has been adopted by most public bodies, so the police work along with it, the government works along with it. What they've been trying to do is to come up with a definition of Islamophobia which doesn't do the things that you just said. So the idea is you'd still be able to criticise Islam as a religion.
But you can't do that already. Tell that to the Batley Grammar School teacher.
Well, no, hang on.
Sir David Amos.
Yeah, well,
it could be deadly.
It can be deadly. You're absolutely right, but that doesn't mean...
Why on earth... that
doesn't mean it's legal.
Why on earth does it need... Why on earth do Muslims need more protection? Surely, in an open democracy, a secular democracy, we should be allowed to criticise any faith. We don't need a new definition.
And the whole point is that you wouldn't be stopping the criticism of religion. Where they've got so far is that it would be racism targeted at Muslimness. That's as far as they've got with the definition. It's not ideal.
But Muslim isn't a race.
No, that's the point. That is the point. So that is why they've struggled with it. That was an all-party group in the House of Commons that came up with that. Government says that you can't really do that for the reason that you said. Equally, you must come up with a definition that does not mean that Islam can't be criticised. That is what's being worked on at the moment, and it seems right to me you should have that. If you can come to a definition of anti-Semitism, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition that goes across the world...
But Jews don't go around the world chopping the heads off teachers.
No,
let's be brutal about this.
I'm not quite sure what that's got to do. What that necessarily has got to do with it. The teacher
has everything to do with it, because it can be deadly to criticise Islam. And we should not, many people believe, be affording more
terrorism is illegal. The terrorism is illegal. The kind of things that you're talking about, Islamist extremists.
That's the point. An overarching definition of Islamophobia would give cover to extremists.
No, it wouldn't. There's no way it would.
We have to interrupt now because I think we've got some more live pictures now. Donald Trump is meeting the Polish president as we speak on an action-packed day in Washington. Let's go to that. OK, this is Donald Trump. And, of course, Donald Trump has been having a whistle-stop tour of all... Interesting camera view of the sky there. The cameraman may have fallen over. But on a serious point, Donald Trump, of course, has been going to all the world leaders. We're going to go back to that when we get a better picture. That's going to give me vertigo. On a serious point, back to this Islamophobia thing, why on earth are... The perception is this. The perception is that the Labour Party uniquely seems to have more of a reliance upon the Muslim voting bloc, and therefore, you may argue, you may disagree, the Muslim faith is being afforded more protection than Christianity, more protection than the Jewish faith. Why?
Well, it's not a question.
Why go there?
It's not a question of more protection. I mean, I think that that there are problems with Islam in the sense that if you have a strong faith, it should have strong foundations. Christianity does. So we can obviously take the mickey out of Christianity, and people might get offended, but on the whole, it's okay. You're absolutely right. If you do that with Islam, there can be some really fatal consequences. Yeah. We know what happened to Charlie Hebdo in Paris. We know what has happened over here.
The grammar school teacher is still in hiding. His entire
absolutely.
Family. And by the way, the politicians abandoned him. The school union abandoned him. Now, the media ostensibly abandoned him. We didn't on GBNews. You know, Paul Halloran, a good friend of mine, speaks to him on a regular basis. It's grotesque betrayal. And what I'm saying is, if you give more protection to Islam,
but you're not protecting things like that. We're not protecting things like that. That you're covered by free speech. The idea of actually producing cartoons of Muhammad is a pretty bad idea anyway.
Why?
Because of what you might face from extremist Muslims. We're talking about
protection,
4 million people.
If you say you can't criticise Islam, and now it's enshrined in law, you're creating bigger problems.
It's not saying you can't criticise Islam for the very reasons you're talking about. I criticise Islam. I think that it shouldn't be quite so sensitive as it is.
OK, thank you. We're going to keep going all day on this. We're going to go back to Nigel Farage as and when he appears. More from Reform UK's Nigel Farage address to the Congress throughout the rest of the show. Loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. But first, let's get to your man, Sam Francis, for your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. 4:30, the top story. Angela Rayner has admitted she underpaid stamp duty on a flat purchase and referred herself to the ethics watchdog. She says she deeply regrets the error, blaming a complex family situation. Sir Keir Starmer, though, gave her his full backing at Prime Minister's questions. The Chancellor's budget will be on the 26th of November. Rachel Reeves is facing a £41 billion black hole, though, fueling talks of property tax hikes. The Conservatives accuse Labour of planning to tax the living daylights out of families, but ministers dismiss that as speculation. Nigel Farage has warned America that Britain has lost its way on free speech. Testifying in Washington today, he called the arrest of Father Ted creator Graham Luneham at Heathrow extraordinary, saying it could happen to US visitors too. The government says it wants to merge all of Britain's steel firms into one. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds heads to China next week for talks as ministers try to rescue an industry hit by soaring costs and global oversupply. And in Beijing, China has paraded its latest laser and nuclear weapons, with Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un watching on. President Xi declared China unstoppable in its first ever three-way summit with the Russian and North Korean leaders. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at 5.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. For the first part of the evening, we'll continue to see spells of rain, also some showers, but for most it'll turn a little drier overnight. Away from the southwest though, further thunderstorms on their way here. And the reason for the unsettled picture, well, it's all thanks to low pressure, eventually moving the outbreaks of rain towards the North Sea, but we do need to keep an eye on the southwest, further thunderstorms arriving as we head towards dawn. Now it should turn mostly dry across much of England and Wales, still plenty of showers feeding into the west, longer spells of rain across the far northeast of Scotland, feeling a little cooler and fresher where we do see those clear skies develop. But a different story in the southwest, once again some blustery winds returning and a risk of thunderstorms as we head towards the morning, lows reaching around 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. So it's set to be another wet start across the south. A risk of thunderstorms which may bring hail, also a frequent band of lightning as it slowly skirts its way northeastwards. Towards eastern areas of England, a little drier to start the day, but still a risk of showers across Northern Ireland and northwestern parts of England. The main shower risk will be across western parts of Scotland towards the northeast, a little drier and brighter to start Thursday morning. But a risk of thunderstorms, particularly across the central slice of the UK as this band pushes its way northeastward. So once again, some quite heavy and gusty downpours associated with this, and also a chance we could see a fair amount of lightning too. Elsewhere though, a day of sunny spells and showers. It'll still be fairly blustery if you do catch any of these heavier downpours, but otherwise winds will be much lighter, particularly across the south than of late. Fairly similar temperatures, highs reaching around 20 to 21 degrees Celsius. Any heavy showers or thunderstorms eventually easing away towards the evening. There'll still be some showers lingering on, but for many it should be a mostly dry night. Plenty of clear skies too as we start to see a ridge of high pressure build, which leads us into a mostly fine day on Friday and Saturday before a return of the wet and windy weather on Sunday, but things will still feel relatively warm in the sunshine.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Access to the M74 southbound Junction 1 and M8 eastbound Junction 22 from M77 northbound is restricted due to a road incident. Take caution and allow extra time. On the M4 in West Berkshire, eastbound between junctions 15 and 14, 2 lanes are closed following a collision. Westbound between junctions 12 and 13, there's a lane closed due to another collision. In Kent, expect 40-minute delays on the M25 clockwise at junction 1B due to a collision. 1 of 4 lanes remains closed. And on the trains, disruptions affect Avanti West Coast between Watford Junction and Milton Keynes. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Time is 4:37. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on this action-packed afternoon here on GB News. Now, Number 10 has confirmed that ministers are considering once again introducing digital ID as part of their efforts, this time to crack down on small boat crossings. Now, the government's previously steered clear of digital ID cards as a way to deter channel crossings, despite repeated calls from senior figures such as the former Labour Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair. However, they have now acquiesced, with the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, saying the UK is behind the curve on the rollout of ID cards. Here's the big question. Is controlling our borders and controlling those who walk amongst us a price to pay? Is it finally time for a digital ID here in the UK? Well, let's chat about it now. I'm joined in the studio by the Executive Director of Politics at the Tony Blair Institute, Ryan Wayne, and also, of course, by Nigel Nelson here in the studio. Ryan, a pleasure to have your company. Confession. I've always been against ID cards on principle. I think it's an infringement of my civil liberties. Why should I live in a show as your papers society? Many people feel that COVID was a low watermark of that, when your man Tony Blair wanted it to happen then, because of course it was happening in a lot of countries around the world, and people saw it as an infringement upon their civil liberties. But have we lost control of our population to such an extent now, with illegal immigrants, that bringing in an ID is the only way of getting a handle on who's amongst us?
Well, first of all, I welcome the debate, and I think it's really important that we're having it. And we live in a democracy, we embrace free speech, we should have this discussion. I think the question is even more fundamental than that. For me, digital ID is a question of what Britain do we want to live in. And I want to live in a country where people can't work and live illegally. I want to live in a country where a fake passport means that you can open a bank account and you can send money back home, where unscrupulous employers exploit migrant labour. I don't want to live in a country which gangs are able to sell a dream of slipping into the informal economy. And a digital ID, a universal digital ID, it puts an end to all of that. It stops you from being able to work illegally, and it stops you from being able to live illegally. You can't open a bank account without it. And that is going to really shrink the supply of illegal workers that are going into these employers.
On the counterpoint, I would argue, and many would also, if somebody's going to throw their passport in the channel when they're in a dinghy, why on earth are they going to comply with a digital ID card? These are lawbreakers by definition. And a second point, during COVID, we saw that the panacea of a digital ID became a weapon of the state to stop us having liberties. Go to church, go to the supermarket, go to the gym, even go for a pint. People are desperately concerned that surrendering liberties for lawbreakers mean we could all be judged and have our freedoms curtailed.
Well, let's take those in turn. I think to the first question, it's a good one. These are lawbreakers, not just because they're throwing passports, but because they're coming here illegally, which is why we need to act. The reality is that they will have no choice. With a universal digital ID, you cannot open a bank account without one. And we're not even talking about working illegally here in, dodgy employers. We're talking about being able to do the things that make people want to work illegally in the first place, make money and often send it back home. You won't be able to rent. You won't be able to get accommodation, because what a universal digital ID does is it knocks out our paper-based society, which is outdated, and we're being overtaken by countries to the east and west of us. It knocks that out and replaces it with this robust, privacy-enhancing digital ID that puts us, British citizens, in control of our data. And there's something very exciting about that, I think.
OK, and then back to the fact that the precise same technology was foisted upon us by Tony Blair and others during the time of COVID. COVID passports, which is absolutely a show-as-your-paper society. A well-meaning technology now could, in the future, be used to clamp down on us again.
I think we're in danger of disagreeing on COVID passports, Martin, but we're in a democracy, so let's embrace it. I think COVID was a choice between freedom and remaining in lockdown. And I did a lot of work during that time. And the reason why I was drawn towards a COVID passport is because it was a way out of the pandemic safely and freely, by being able to demonstrate that you had immunity through the vaccine. Now, I know things have moved on since then. I know a third of the country say that the COVID vaccine did more harm than good. But I think we've left a bit of a vacuum there, actually. We should be making the case and arguing for it. In terms of this being a dystopian future, one where it could be used by a malign government for real.
It could.
It could.
And it has been. It was used that way in Israel. People weren't allowed to go to the synagogue if they didn't have their green pass. And the precise same technology Tony Blair wanted to mirror in the UK.
But I think if we apply this to a pandemic, it means that we would never have to go into lockdown again. I think lockdown deprived us of our liberty in a way that I hope I never experience again and my fellow citizens never experience. This is the way out. But in terms of digital ID, Estonia, Sweden, Denmark, France, the UAE, they are living freely. They are not under constant surveillance. Their privacy has been, if anything, enhanced by this. And I think it's about time Britain caught up.
OK, Nigel Nelson, you've been waiting patiently. What's your take on bringing in universal digital ID for British citizens?
Against it. I don't want an ID that allows just to walk around my own country. I think I should be allowed to do that anyway. I carry a lot of ID, so it's all because I want something. I want to drive, so I carry a driving licence. I want to go abroad, so I take a British passport. That's fine. If you want to introduce ID as a right to work, because it would simplify the process, and bear in mind, it doesn't give someone the right to work, that at the moment that they can't get a job or rent without the right paperwork anyway, if they're an immigrant. So the argument would be, do it for a right to work, it's something you want. If you want to add things to that ID card, then do so. If you want your educational qualifications there, if you want your health records there, if you want your driving licence on it, but it should be a voluntary thing. I don't want to be compelled to have these things.
Ryan, there's also the powerful point that Tony Blair might make a stack of money out of this. Am I being cynical when I say that there are billions and billions and billions of pounds in an ID, not only in Britain, but if it worked in Britain, it could be rolled out elsewhere. Am I being cynical when I think this could be a huge moneymaker for an already very wealthy Tony Blair?
Well, the last time I checked, Tony Blair presided over a non-profit institute, of which I'm very proud to be part of. Put it this way, no money will be made. We are doing this in the public interest. And, Nigel, again, I think the points you raise are legitimate concerns. But I would push back on two fronts. One is the potential up to 1.2 million people working here illegally. We need to make it as hard as possible for those people to be able to open bank accounts, to be able to access housing, to be able to access public services. Digital ID does that. And I scoured my sent emails over the last 10 years. The amount of times I had to send my passport, a bank statement, a copy of my driver's licence.
Well, you're suggesting the whole thing will make life much easier.
I think it would.
Well, then why not make it voluntary? We'll all have one then, because if life is so much easier, we'll go out and grab it.
I think this is up for debate. Look, I think it's going to be more effective the more people who have it, but I think you want to make it so compelling, and I think it will be. I think it's not just about migration. This is about transforming public services so they're personalised, data-driven, in a way that we can't expect in our private lives. I think you make it so compelling that we'll be sitting in the studio in 2 years' time.
Guys, fascinating conversation, but we have to go now to Donald Trump. He's with the Polish president. And again, this is the latest. We're waiting on a sound link there. He's currently speaking to the Polish president, of course, the latest in a huge line. I think now we do have an audio link.
The things that you discuss. We'll have a few questions from you, and then we'll get on to a discussion. Then we'll have lunch, and then he goes and he meets with the Pope. And that'll be very exciting. And say hello to the Pope for me.
Yeah,
okay.
I will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Mr. President. Thank you very much, and I would like to express my gratitude for your invitation. Only after 1 month from my sworn and from celebration for my inauguration, it means that Polish-American relations are very important, very strong. I think that we have so strong relations that we have never had, and it's very important for me. Our relations are based, of course, on the values. Right. And thank you very much for your support, for your endorsement during my very hard campaign. I remember it, and I'm very grateful for your support. It was the fight me against others, so your support was very important, and the support of Polish people, Polish diaspora in United States of America. We have almost more than 10 million people here, and they voted for Donald Trump.
They voted for me.
Yeah, and in vast majority they voted also for me, so I would like to say hello to Polish diaspora in United States of America. Those relations for me, for Poland, for Poles are very important with United States of America, and they are based on values: independence, sovereignty, democracy, and I think, Mr. President, that those values are epitomized by our common heroes, Kazimierz Pułaski and Tadeusz Kościuszko. So thank you very much, and I hope it will be very fruitful discussion around the energy, around the economy and military service. Yeah.
And the flyover was very much in honor of your great pilot who just passed away recently, who was a legend in Poland. You might want to say something about him.
Yes, of course, it was a terrific accident in Poland. Thank you for this gesture that F-35 opened our meeting. Major Krakowian was one of the best Polish pilots, well-honed Polish pilots, and he died. He lost 2 children, so it was a great tragedy.
He was a legend in Poland, actually, a legend as a pilot. He was an incredible pilot, and I think he went to the Air Force Academy, actually. But he was a fantastic pilot, and it was a big setback. The people of Poland are very, very sad, so we thought we'd do that. That was the single plane that swooped up.
And machines, American machines, opened our meeting. It was great. And we are waiting for 32 F-35s in Poland. So it also shows that we have great relations according to the best military equipment on the world, American equipment, which build Polish security too.
Well, Poland, we've had a tremendous relationship. I think now it's better than ever because of this relationship, but it's a little special because we fought together. But we've always been very good, and we have some wonderful people, as you know. Duda, my friend, he's a good man and still a big fan of yours, very much so. So it's a great honor, and we're going to talk about trade. We'll talk about some other things. We'll take a couple of questions from the media.
Will American soldiers remain in Poland? Will American soldiers remain in Poland?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do you know something I don't? I don't know. Yeah, we're very happy. If anything, we'll put more there if they want. But they've long wanted to have a larger presence. We have some countries that have more, not too many, but no, they'll be staying in Poland. We're very much aligned with Poland.
Sir, on Russia and China, you certainly asked about, we saw a dramatic picture where we saw the leaders of Russia and North Korea and China together, the first time the leaders of those 3 countries have been together in this sort of show of solidarity. You said that they're conspiring against the United States. What do you think they're conspiring to do? And given this, is it reason why you should slap or would consider slapping secondary sanctions on Russia if they're conspiring against the U.S. now?
Well, I've already done that with regard to India, and we're doing it with regard to other things. And I put out a truth last night. You saw that. And I was the one that brought it up. I said, they're only doing this. They're looking to, when they did what they did, I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I thought it was very, very impressive. But I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or two. I think that we helped China very much, as you know, when they talk about freedom. And I don't believe that, and maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't believe that America, that the United States was acknowledged for helping China to gain its freedom. But perhaps that was just that was a sleight of hand. I mean, I was very surprised. I watched the speech last night. President Xi's a friend of mine, but I thought that the United States should have been mentioned last night during that speech because we helped China very, very much.
What was the reason they should have been invited, Mr. President? What was the reason? Mr. President, do you think they should have been invited?
Yes, go ahead.
You've expressed many times your frustration and disappointment with Putin, but there's no action since you took your office.
How do you know there's no action? Really? Wait. Who are you with?
I'm with the Polish radio.
Okay. How do you know there's no action? Would you say that putting secondary sanctions on India, the largest purchaser outside of China, they're almost equal, would you say there was no action? That cost hundreds of billions of dollars to Russia. You call that no action? And I haven't done phase 2 yet or phase 3. But when you say there's no action, I think you ought to get yourself a new job, because if you remember 2 weeks ago I said if India buys, India's got big problems, and that's what happened. So don't tell me about that. Go ahead.
Mr. President, right now there have been survivors of Jeffrey Epstein speaking at a press conference on Capitol Hill. They're calling for these case files, these documents to be released. And Thomas Massey, who was sponsoring a discharge position to get the House to vote on releasing those documents, says he doesn't believe you're implicated in these files, but many of your friends and donors may be, and he says that's why the Justice Department is redacting them and slow-walking the release. Is the Justice Department protecting any friends or donors, sir?
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. You know, it reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more, and nobody's ever satisfied. From what I understand, I could check, but from what I understand, thousands of pages of documents have been given. But it's really a Democrat hoax, because they're trying to get people to talk about something that's totally irrelevant to the success that we've had as a nation since I've been president. Even if you look at D.C. right now, D.C., it's a totally safe zone. It's called a safe zone. That's a term. It's a term of art. It's a safe zone because it's very safe. You can walk down the street now and nothing's going to happen. No crime, no murders, no nothing. Because we had a lot of problems with certain places, and we still do. All run by Democrats, or for the most part run by Democrats. So what they're trying to do with the Epstein hoax is get people to talk about that instead of speaking about the tremendous success like ending 7 wars. Sure. I ended 7 wars. Nobody's going to talk about because they're going to talk about the Epstein. I understand that we were subpoenaed to give files, and I understand we've given thousands of pages of files. And I know that no matter what you do, it's going to keep going. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having. I think we're probably having, according to what I read, even from 2 people in this room, we're having the most successful 8 months of any president ever. And that's what I want to talk about. That's what we should be talking about, not the Epstein hoax.
When you going to make a decision on Ukraine, Mr. President? Why not?
I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
Sir, Venezuela, can you give us a sense of what the U.S. policy, or what you're trying to achieve with the aircraft carriers, or the boats, I should say, in near Venezuela, and also the boat that you mentioned yesterday where 11 people were killed? What was found on that boat, and why were the men killed instead of taken into
On the boat, you had massive amounts of drugs. We have tapes of them speaking. There was massive amounts of drugs coming into our country to kill a lot of people. And everybody fully understands that. In fact, you see it. You see the bags of drugs all over the boat. And they were hit. Obviously, they won't be doing it again. And I think a lot of other people won't be doing it again when they watch that tape. They're going to say, let's not do this. We have to protect our country, and we're going to. Venezuela's been a very bad actor. They've been, as you know, they've been sending millions of people into our country, many of them Tren de Aragua, some of the worst gangs, some of the worst people anywhere in the world in terms of gangs. And we had some in Washington, D.C. We took care of them very quickly, but they're out of here. They've gone. But Venezuela's been very bad, both in terms of drugs and sending some of the worst criminals anywhere in the world into our country. They emptied out, you don't know this, but they emptied out their prisons in Venezuela, and they emptied them out into the United States of America. And that's part of the problem we have. We're getting them out. We're getting them out rapidly, but it's caused a tremendous problem. And Pete and all of the people that are working very hard to rectify the stupidity of the Biden administration, allowing these people to pour into our country with open borders. we are paying a big price as a country for the incompetence of the Biden administration. But think of it. Opened up prisons, drug dealers, drug lords, everything coming out of Venezuela. They said, and we said, we're not going to put up with it anymore. So Venezuela has been one of the worst actors in the whole group, and we have a group of pretty bad actors.
Are you wanting to force withdrawal?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. At the end of this month, the government or the Congress has to pass a budget. Do you think we can avoid a government shutdown?
Yeah, I do. I think the Republicans will vote for an extension. We won't have any Democrat votes. We could give the greatest budget ever. Tax cut of 50%, everybody taken care of, perfect for women, perfect for men, perfect for minorities, perfect for everything, and we wouldn't get one vote for the Democrats because they've lost their mind. They are so deranged. They have Trump derangement syndrome. I don't want to burden the Republican Party with it, but they really are. They've become almost sick. They actually think there is a disease. It's called Trump derangement syndrome. They've got it. No matter what we did, no matter how good, you could give them everything that they've ever dreamed of, and you wouldn't get one vote. These are sick people, and I think we're going to have a tremendous midterm. We just approved the largest tax decrease in the history of our country. We have things, if you think of it, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security for our seniors, no tax on overtime, deductions when you buy a car and you borrow money to buy a car. First time they've ever seen anything like this. Middle-income people get deductions. You get a deduction when you buy a car. Nobody's ever seen. And by the way, they're selling cars like crazy. Cars are pouring back because of the fact that we have tariffs. Cars are pouring back into our car plants are pouring back into our nation. They're coming from all over the world. They're coming back. You know, we lost about 54% of automobile manufacturing over a 30-year period, 35-year period. They're all coming back. I think they're coming back higher than ever before. We have AI going up. What we've done is amazing, and what we've passed is amazing. But the Democrats, I don't believe, will get one vote. It's very anti-crime. We want anti-crime. They're in favor of crime.
Donald Trump now. Let's go back to Nigel Farage in Washington, D.C.
No, absolutely not. Of course not.
Can you comment on the key issue before the far right that we heard about earlier? What is that key issue in Europe right now that the far right is heavily engaged in?
Well, if you're in the I'll speak for the United Kingdom. If you're opposed to illegal immigration on a mass scale and the huge cost to the taxpayer and the risk to our communities, then and if you like the flag, our national flag, then apparently you're far right.
So that illegal immigration issue that was very informative to the election in 2024 in America, the same thing is happening in Europe? Is that accurate?
It's a very similar argument in many, many ways, and therefore the definition of far right, I think, now applies to about 2/3 of the British population.
So I think about someone who's very famous from your country, Ms. J.K. Rowling, who wrote one of the finest series of books, the Harry Potter series, that has ever been in print, who I believe is self-defined as a liberal, as we call them in America. Hasn't she even been threatened for a position she's taken in regards to transgenderism?
Yes, she very much comes from a liberal wing of politics historically, but she's taken a view that women should be safe in women's spaces. That means changing rooms, etc. That's all she said. And by the way, that's something that our Supreme Court recently actually did back up, the fact that there are fundamental differences. And this is not to launch an attack on anyone that's trans, just to bring some common sense in. And she has faced cancel culture and abuse on a huge scale.
I would just, one other comment in regards to the ranking member's opening statement. He was saying that we are stifling speech here in America, including PBS, by defunding them. I would suggest that the ranking member look at the news that came out in the past week. It is very good news for PBS, where the Ford Foundation and other foundations have said they're going to put in tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that they stay on the air. Protecting the American taxpayer, I think that is a great thing that we were able to do with the One Big Beautiful Bill. Final question for Mr. Price. How is the problem going to be fixed? And can America help?
Yes, America can help. The spotlight that has already been shone on the problem by the administration, by the amazing work that this committee is doing here, is hugely welcome by those of us who support the human right to free speech. We have people who are suffering under prosecutions, unjust prosecutions in Europe right now. I've outlined a lot of them in my written submissions, and it's only because of the support that's coming from this side of the Atlantic that we're able to see possibly a brighter future.
And we will continue those efforts.
Thank you.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, when I was a professor of constitutional law, I used to teach my students that freedom of speech is like an apple, and everybody wants to take just one bite out of the apple. Somebody doesn't like left-wing speech, there's a bite. Somebody doesn't like right-wing speech. Somebody doesn't like feminist speech. Somebody doesn't like sexist speech, and everybody just wants to take one bite. But if we let everybody take a bite, at the end of the day, there's no apple left. It's all gone. So if you want to defend free speech and you want a society that's defined by free speech, you've got to accept even the speech you oppose, the speech that you abhor. Now, Professor Kay, we want to try to bring some objectivity to the conversation. I looked up the Reporters Without Borders rankings of every country in the world, according to press freedom. Norway was number 1. North Korea was number 179. It's like a totalitarian dungeon. The UK was number 20. The US was number 57 under Trump, down from 45, where it was before. Russia, which some people here lionize, was at 171, right? So if we were going to undertake a serious study of the state of press freedom all over the world, for example, where should our focus be?
I appreciate that question. I have a very long list that I could highlight.
But just tell us methodologically, quickly, how we should go about doing it if we wanted to undertake this in a serious way.
Absolutely. I mean, I would really use the lens of what do we need as a democracy in order to be well-informed, in order to make choices about our democracy, to make choices about our health. What do we need? We need an open press. We need open government. We need access. We absolutely don't want to see websites scrubbed, as this administration has done. So I would look at it through that lens, through the lens of what we need in order to have a democracy.
Gotcha. Mr. Farage, first of all, to be called charming by you, a man of your evident erudition and dazzling brilliance, is undoubtedly a Lifetime Achievement Award for me, so I will hold it closely. But I wanted to ask you about your commitment to the freedom of speech universally. I think it's a principle that you advocate for everyone, not just for people who are in your party or people you agree with. You said that there should not have been a protest against the Gaza war in the UK. And then when it went ahead, the police refused to shut it down. You called them gutless for not shutting it down. Do you regret having opposed that, given that there was no violence there and there were 700,000 people who wanted to express themselves that day?
I have not opposed people standing up and protesting in favor of people living in Gaza at all. There was one particular day, and it was the Sunday nearest November the 11th, which was when we had big memorial services in London. And I think a march being allowed to go ahead on that day would have been a mistake. Any other day, fine.
Oh, I see. Who gets to decide that?
Well, I think actually something that is embedded in the country, something that is absolutely fundamental to.
That's why we have a written constitution. You might take that idea back to the UK with you. Well, because the freedom of speech applies 365 days a year here under the First Amendment, not 364, 363, depending on some politicians heckling the government and telling them to shut down free speech.
We have allowed mass pro-Gaza demonstrations in London weekend after weekend.
No thanks to you. All right, let me change.
This was let me
try another one.
Sensitive day. That's all.
I got you. It was a sensitive day. And I thought that's what the freedom of speech was about. You have a right to engage in speech that other people consider offensive or insensitive. But in any event, you've made yourself clear, Mr. Farage.
64 days a year if they want.
You've made yourself clear to your constituents in Claxton today. Let me ask you this. You've banned journalists from your political events that you disagree with, haven't you?
No, in fact, I'm the only political
Really? At your convention, you didn't ban journalists and revoke their credentials?
You know, I take, the average press conference, I take 25 questions.
No, that wasn't my question. Mr. Farage, we're politicians, so we see what you're doing. I'm asking you a direct question.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased
I'm asking you a direct question, and I hope you can answer it. Why do you ban journalists who oppose your views from coming to your events? Why did you tell your party, why did you tell the local government not to do interviews with your local newspaper?
I'm the most open person to any journalist.
Undoubtedly, you're the handsomest man in the world. But I'm asking you a different question, okay? That's not my question. My question for you is, and it's legit, why do you ban journalists that you disagree with from your political events, like from your convention?
I don't.
Okay, and you say you've never done that?
I can't think, if I go back the last 25 years, I can't think of banning anybody. But I mean, maybe somebody else did. But look,
I see. It was somebody else who did it.
I do more. I take more questions.
All right.
From journalists.
Do you have
all
any
the other
objections?
leaders added up together.
Okay, Mr. Price, let me ask you. You're an honest man. Do you have any objection to the things you've heard about what Donald Trump is doing in the United States of America, going after law firms, for example, banning them from federal buildings and federal courthouses, stripping them of security clearance, saying they can never get federal jobs or contracts because he doesn't like something one of the lawyers at the firm did? Do you think there's a First Amendment problem with that, as our courts have found?
There's a lot of information you've put into that. It's good to talk to you again after London.
Yeah, have you followed that at all?
I haven't. I have to be perfectly honest with you now.
Okay, do you have any problems with anything Donald Trump has done with respect to free speech and freedom of expression in America? Or you just haven't followed it?
I'm not as well. There are plenty of people here better informed on American matters than I.
And we are. So thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. My guess is Mr. Farage takes press questions probably as often as President Trump does. These are two guys who aren't afraid to talk to the press and take any question that comes to them. We've seen that displayed time and time again. The gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it was an honor to be with you and the ranking member as we had the chance to see firsthand what's going on in the EU and in the UK. Maybe this Raskin Farage show could become a recurring event. It's gotten very interesting on both occasions. But I'd actually like to direct my questions to you, Mr. Price, at first. It's good to see you again. I think that those of us on the trip were really alarmed by the ways in which the tide is turning against free speech in the UK and the EU, and I think that there actually was quite a bit of bipartisan agreement among the members of our delegation on a number of these issues. So I was hoping you could give us a little context of what you think explains this. And I think that we understand that not every country needs to have has a First Amendment or needs to have the exact same standards or the exact same exceptions or the exact same ways that the law is applied. But we've always, I think, felt it important that we have an alliance with our European allies around the issues of freedom that stands in contrast to authoritarian regimes around the world, like in Russia, like in China, places where they don't have free speech. And so to the extent that these values are fraying among our allies, then it really harms our ability to stand up for the values of freedom around the world. So what do you think is going on? How can we sort of strengthen our alliance with our European allies around the issue of freedom of speech?
Thank you, sir. Well, what we've seen, sadly, over many decades, and it's accelerating, has been a consistent use of overbroad, vague laws to crack down on speech that's regarded as provocative or unorthodox. And I can give you, and I have given examples of the clients that I'm involved in representing, where they've been simply speaking about their faith publicly, or where they've been offering to talk to people. So things have reached a crisis point, though, and this is why I think it's important that Vice President Vance and the administration have intervened. And one thing I would say, without divulging any contents of conversations, but Representative Raskin and I had quite a good conversation about just how bad things had become in Europe. And I agree with you. I think there is a bipartisan realization, certainly on this committee, and I commend the work that it's doing, about the nature of the problem in Europe. With the DSA, though, we find then the European Union stepping into speech, regulating it, and bringing that restrictive model global. And this is where I think really the work that's been happening here is crucial, because we can't allow that to happen, because we're going back to COVID-style censorship all over again.
Thank you. And of course, it's doubly concerning when this actually implicates the free speech rights of Americans. But I would hope that moving forward, we can try to work with our counterparts in Europe to try to get back to having these shared values around freedom of speech, and we don't continue to see a divergence. Mr. Reid, I also wanted to ask you about the DMA because, I know you represent smaller app developers, but we also spoke with, folks who represent Apple and Facebook and others, and it's a matter of public record the way that these companies are now sort of uniquely targeted under this law and the similar law in the UK. And honestly, it caused me to sort of see some of the ongoing negotiations around tariffs and other issues through a somewhat different lens, because the way that American companies are being targeted with the DMA really is a tax or imposes or is a direct transfer of wealth from our country overseas. And these are some of the sort of non-tariff barriers that American countries are now facing. So could you give me your perspective on that and the DMA more broadly?
Right. It's ironic that, as you say, it's a non-tariff trade barrier, but the ultimate biggest loser is usually the smaller and medium-sized companies. Earlier, we heard a member of this committee just talk about bills here in the United States. The irony of those who supported those bills were also billionaire companies. We joked about the fact that it was the trillionaires versus the billionaires who went to war. And the problem when that happens, if any of you run a small business, is the small guy gets crushed. And what's happening with the DMA in Europe is their desire to put pressure on the US companies means that there are fewer services, fewer features, and less trust are available for the smaller businesses to take advantage of. And that's how we get crushed, and that ends up being as you say, a non-tariff trade barrier because it puts the very companies that could compete with these giants at a disadvantage when they have to meet those new tests.
Thank you. And I think that this is going to be an important issue for us to remain focused on as to how we can alleviate these barriers that our companies are facing that honestly are hindering innovation in Europe as well. I yield back. Yield back to the chair.
Real clear on the most recent situation. Maybe I'll direct this to Mr. Farage. So Graham Lineman is an Irish citizen who posted something while in America and then gets arrested when he goes to the UK for some, quote, offensive post online. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely right.
Yeah, that's where this is all headed. That's exactly where this is all headed. The gentleman from California who accompanied us on the trip, when we were so glad that he did, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also appreciate being invited on a trip and spending time with you and our ranking member, Raskin. Very informative. Interesting looking at the DMA, winners and losers, unintended consequences. According to a recent report commissioned by the EC, the future of European competitiveness, only 4 of the 50 top tech firms in the world are actually in Europe. As a Californian, I found it very interesting that a lot of the European entrepreneurs move out of Europe, move to the US, specifically California, to grow, and then possibly move back to Europe. I'm a Californian, so the health and welfare, the interests of California firms is interest to me. And seeing hundreds of millions of dollars in fines under DMA's nebulous violations being levied against California firms, money that could be best spent on R&D in many ways, is very bothersome. I care about encouraging California entrepreneurs. We have the most successful entrepreneurs in the world today, yet they are essentially being targeted by the EU and other foreign regulations. California, this money is better, again, invested in creating jobs in California. And by the way, a lot of these firms that are actually being fined actually pay taxes in California. Today, California recently passed up Japan to become the 4th largest economy in the world. California is the number 1 producer of ag products in the world, number 1 in terms of venture capital in the US, number 1 manufacturer. We pay $100 billion more to the US federal government than we get back on an annual.
OK, we're going to dip out now of that historical addressing of the House Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C. in Congress by Nigel Farage. Outside of that building, our own man in Washington, D.C., Chris Hope, our political editor, is there for us on the ground. Chris, welcome back to the show. A huge amount has been covered off today. We started with Lucy Connolly. We then moved on to the arrest of Graham Linehan. Nigel Farage comparing the United Kingdom to North Korea. He said COVID is when things began to change, when the authorities become somewhat more totalitarian. He laid into non-crime hate incidents. He laid into the Labour Party's definition of Islamophobia. He talked about the far right. He defended J.K. Rowling. And then there was an astonishing exchange there from an extremely hostile American Democrat, Jamie Raskin, who started the day by calling Nigel Farage a Putin-loving free speech imposter. Now, bear in mind, these guys have got form. Back in July, when Raskin came to London, he called Nigel Farage the most pig-headed person he'd ever met. There's no love lost between the pair of them, and they had an astonishing confrontation a short while ago, Chris Hope.
Yeah, that's right. I was in the room for that moment. What's interesting, I think, if you take a step back, looking at US politics compared to my normal day job back in covering Westminster, is how much more partisan it is, the way that these Democratic congressmen and women talk over Nigel Farage when he's trying to respond. There's no real attempt by the chair, it seems, to control that. I think equally the Republicans pile in his support. He is seen, of course, by Democrats as a way of attacking the President, Donald Trump. He was criticised by that Democrat for leading what they called a fringe party. He said you're only here pushing hard on the issue of free speech to do a favour for your tech bros. He said that Nigel Farage was chasing money from Elon Musk. That prompted Nigel Farage to say he had a very public falling out with Elon Musk. He's not trying to ingratiate himself with tech bros. He said that the Online Safety Act is a danger to trade between our two countries, the UK and US, but he said he's not suggesting sanctions should be imposed, as was suggested earlier, of course, by Keir Starmer in Prime Minister's questions. He also said he didn't think that the government, this is Nigel Farage, should be the arbiter of what we should think. There should be limits, of course, on freedom of speech, but it's gone too far, and he tracked that back, didn't he, to COVID, to when people spoke out against the vaccine. He said they were shut down by quite draconian measures by the government. He thinks that's where this line was crossed. He said earlier, of course, at the very beginning, that we spent we have a history in our country of fighting tyranny. He says, and we're almost giving in to tyranny, it seems, over the internet. He also defended the UK in ending the slave trade. It's been a tour de force by Nigel Farage, I think, on Capitol Hill. Fascinating to cover it, to be here covering it for GB News.
Chris Hope, I think one of the most standout lines, and perhaps one that will force action from the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper back here in Westminster, was that connection, if you like, the arrest of Graham Linehan, an Irishman who tweeted in America and returned to the United Kingdom, not even a British citizen, but was arrested by 5 armed British police officers. And then Nigel Farage made the statement, this could happen to any American. And I think the room gasped at that moment when the realisation was that anybody could feel the long arm of the law back in Britain, even if you're not a Brit.
That is exactly right, Martin. Americans here might feel they can tweet what they like because of the Article 1, the amendment to their constitution. They have this right to free speech. But what appears to have happened is that Mr. Linehan, who's living in America, he's an Irish person, he tweeted those remarks, and because people were offended by them in the UK and a complaint was made to the police in the UK, he was arrested by 5 armed police officers arriving in Heathrow a couple of days ago. That's what appears to happen, and that is a real, a chilling threat, Americans would see it as, to freedom of speech. And I think that is where he has cut through. Maybe that's why we see Mark Rowley, who is the Met Police Chief, almost a spokesman, I think, for police officers in our country, running the biggest police force. He's saying he wants guidance in writing from Yvette Cooper to say, should we be policing tweets? Number 10 said on Monday that we shouldn't be policing tweets as a police force, to focus on actual crimes, mugging, stabbings and the like. But I think, to be fair to the police, they've got laws passed by government, and if someone makes a complaint to them, they are duty-bound to investigate that, and that can lead to arrest. So clearly, the police now are pressing on the number 10 and the Home Office to issue some form of statement, some guidance for police officers to disregard tweeting.
Chris Hope, we have an unholy mess back here in Britain. Nobody seems to know who's making the laws, how to impose the laws. We have confusion. We have headless chickens. Let's be honest about this. And Nigel Farage himself was being very heavily criticised by the Prime Minister today at PMQs, people mocking him for, you know, they call Sir Keir Starmer Never Hear Keir or Jet Set Starmer, but the same thing was thrown back at Nigel Farage today. But Nigel Farage did say the timing of the Graham Linehan arrest is almost perfect. He said Mark Rowley has thrown this back at Yvette Cooper, very much there putting the ball in Yvette Cooper's court.
That's right.
And Nigel Farage giving it an extra kick. The Home Secretary has to do something about this chaos.
That's totally right. I mean, the Never Hear Keir line, I think, means a lot more with the Prime Minister. He's running all of our country, of course. He's in charge of everything, and that's why it matters so much where he is. Nigel Farage is the leader of just 5 MPs, 4 MPs, I think, now in the House of Commons. He's not running anything. He knows he only gets called to speak to MPs by the Speaker of the House of Commons once every 2 months. He gets attacked all the time, but he has more chance to make a bearing by speaking, I think, to the Justice Committee here in the States. That's why he's over here.
OK, thank you, Chris. So we'll go straight back inside that building now. Nigel Farage is talking in Congress. Let's get back in.
From the standpoint of borders in the UK, are open borders healthy for either the United States or the UK?
No, they're disastrous.
And are they having a deleterious effect with respect to crime and culture in the UK?
Yes, they are. It's been a debate that's been very difficult to have without being screamed at, but we are now having that debate.
And so now we've got a moment here where we've got someone being put in jail for putting out something on social media that is allegedly transphobic. And so my question is, I wonder what's going to win out? What's going to win out when the questions of Islamophobia and the tenets of Islam mash up against transphobia? What will the determiners of truth in the UK government decide? What will those who make decisions about what we can say and what we cannot say do when these worlds collide? Would you have any comment on that, Mr. Farage?
In the Lucy Connolly case, it's very interesting that this horrific murder of 3 young girls happened. The country was in very deep shock, very deep shock. The government deliberately withheld the truth about who the perpetrator was. And it led to a sea of speculation. It turned out ultimately that the man that committed those murders was in fact UK-born, had not come over on a boat, as was being said on social media. Just goes to show that actually, however bad the news is, people deserve to know the truth about a situation. It stops that frenzy of speculation. Who's going to win these great battles? I think that there is a growing, silent majority, certainly in my country, who object to the 2-tier concept that, you know, Lucy Connolly gets 31. And by the way, there were mitigating circumstances for what she said with her own personal situation, but she's arrested very quickly. She's threatened that if she pleads not guilty, she'll go straight to prison and be on remand until the trial, and goodness knows when. We're not defending what she said, but she recognised her error, you know, in a moment of anger and passion and upset, and she withdrew it 3.5 hours later. I think that the answer, Mr. Roy, is that the silent majority will win. The silent majority will win. Good will triumph over bad, and common sense will be returned. It won't happen quickly. It won't happen quickly. As I've already outlined, there is coming down the tracks an Islamophobia law, which would divide speech even more widely than it is now. But in the end, common sense, decency will win.
Is Sharia law consistent with Western values?
No.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Farage, thanks for being here, coming across the pond. I'm sorry to hear you're leaving the hearing early.
Well, it's not a question of leaving the hearing early, but I do have other things to do. Yes.
Oh, where are you going?
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. Where are you going?
It's not lunch, I promise you.
It's not lunch. You're not going to have lunch.
I don't think so, no.
No lunch.
Sad, isn't
You
it?
meeting with the president?
I can't remember what the schedule is. It's possible.
You can't remember if you're meeting with the president.
I'm being very polite, and I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing this afternoon, but I can assure you that...
But there's the free speech hearing. You're not going to tell me what you're doing this afternoon?
Free speech is one thing, discretion's quite another, too.
Okay. All right, so you're leaving to have lunch with the president. So, Mr. Farage, I have a question. Have you heard about the Epstein thing that's going on here?
I have.
You have? What do you think about it?
I'm not going to give comment on anything happening in America. I'm here as a witness.
Perfect.
I'm here as a witness.
I'm
here as a witness for what is happening in the United Kingdom and in the European
Perfect. Let me just go through it. So it's been 9 months, right, since we've been meeting in these hearings. We've not had Pam Bondi here, even though we have jurisdiction over the Department of Justice, not Dan Bungie.
The gentleman yield?
Not Kash Patel. I will 100%. We'll go back and forth. Let me just do my thing.
Okay.
And
Well, I'm just going to correct. Kash Patel's coming in 2 weeks. I'll give you an extra 10 seconds. Kash Patel, the director of FBI, is coming in 2 weeks, and the Attorney General's coming in 4 weeks.
Fantastic. But still, we're not doing that this week, the week we're having votes on the Epstein thing. So, you know, Pam Bondi gives the influencers, these Republican influencers, a binder. It says Part 1 of the Epstein files. No one of you saw it. It was quite spectacular. The Attorney General then says the Epstein list is on her desk. Then DOJ issues a memo, says there is no list. Then, you have any questions about any of that? We've had no hearings on any of that at all. That, the list is on my desk, then there is no list. Then we gave binders to Republican influencers. This committee's had no questions on any of how that transpired at the Department of Justice. Then hold on.
Well, it sounds like you're going to in the next few weeks. So that's a jolly good thing.
Mr. Farage, we can talk soon, but not yet, okay?
Right.
So, then the president comes out and says the whole thing's a hoax. He blasts his own base. He blames Barack Obama. I mean, he hasn't been president for a very long time. Republicans then in committee vote against the release in the Rules Committee. Then Republicans refuse to go back in the Rules Committee because they're getting blasted for their vote, getting crushed by their own base. Congress leaves a day early. Then the administration sends the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell in jail. He happens to be Trump's former personal attorney. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security prison. The president starts talking about how he has the right to pardon her if he wanted to. The leaks to the Wall Street Journal then stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey petition. Comer does a document dump where 97% of these documents are already public. How long has he had those documents? Why hasn't he released them for the last 6 weeks? Does it the day of the vote. Then Republicans drop a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition. The White House said passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Wow. That's a lot of distraction and deflection and misinformation. Wait, passing a discharge petition to release the Epstein files, the White House said would be a hostile act. Nope, we have no questions about that. But why? Why is it that we're spending so much political capital to keep this list from coming out? You think the list should come out? You think we should know the people who dealt with Mr. Epstein, Mr. Farage?
I thought I was coming to a hearing on free speech, not process.
Oh, well, listen, but here's the good...
It sounds like you're discussing process.
No. Do you think the list should come out?
I have no opinion on it. I don't know at all.
So we have victims that were sexually abused by potentially people in power, and we don't know who's on the list.
I'm very happy.
Hold on, Mr. Farage. We don't know who's on the list. We don't know who's on the list. We don't know if the president is or is not. I'm not going to say he is or isn't. I'm just going to say these are weird behaviors. We don't know that there aren't other people in Congress that are on the list. Right? We have no idea. Do you think the list should come out? You think people in power should be held to account for these victims who have been sexually abused and assaulted? You think the list should come out?
I think that I'm very happy to come to a different hearing where you talk about legal process.
Okay.
But today,
Will the gentleman yield for a quick question? Were you aware that he has already called for the Epstein file to be released? It has been reported that he has called for it to be released.
Oh, yeah, right here, just to refresh your memory. I happen to have this.
But that's not
How random.
But that is not. Look, you can ask me if you like about
Do you agree
social
with
security
yourself?
policy.
Do you agree with yourself?
We are here to discuss free speech.
Hold on. It's awkward for your lunch after this? Do you agree with yourself?
No, it isn't at all.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious. This committee has jurisdiction over the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
Why have we allowed Comer to cover this up for the last couple of months?
As I said,
why is this committee not
I
taking
said 6
jurisdiction?
weeks ago that we will have the FBI director in, we will have the attorney general in, and we are doing that in 2 weeks. You can ask you can go through that whole list. That whole list, you can do whatever you want to do with. I got lots of questions for the FBI director, including the whistleblower who came forward and told him that Adam Schiff leaked classified information. I want to ask him about that as well as the issues you all want to ask him about. That's why he's coming, so we can ask all these questions and follow the process, as Mr. Farage just talked about.
Mr.
The
Chairman,
gentleman from Virginia.
unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent.
I'd like to enter the political article into the record that Mr. Farage said the Epstein file should be released.
Without objection. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I thank the chairman. I want to talk about censorship tools that are being used by Europe and protectionist measures that have major consequences for U.S. companies and free expression worldwide. I'm glad to have you all here to get your views on those issues. Mr. Farage, you've called the Online Safety Act a borderline dystopian censorship regime, and many agree, including myself, that the law badly overreaches. One of the most serious criticisms is that it empowers Ofcom to undermine encryption and open the door to not just government surveillance of posts online and public statements, but private messages, raising alarms not just in the UK, but beyond UK borders. Vice President J.D. Vance has warned this could threaten Americans' privacy as well. Do you recognize that this is not just a domestic issue for the UK, but a global one? And if you become Prime Minister, what assurances would you give allies that the UK will not undermine end-to-end privacy standards?
You have my absolute word that a reform government will repeal the Online Safety Act and will go right back, actually, to legislation back to 2010, under which these whole concepts of hate speech have begun to be interpreted in UK law, and we will do that. Do we want to protect kids? This is the big question. Yes, we do. We need to find means, we need to find ways. I half suggested earlier that hardware could be part of the solution, but yes, we want to protect, to encourage and let free speech flourish.
You've said Reform UK has access to some of the best tech minds to design alternatives. How do you propose to balance protecting children without scanning private messages or weakening encryption?
I think, well, as I said, look, I don't have all the answers to this, but the British Prime Minister says he has got the answers to this. Well, if it's about protecting kids, why does the legislation give Ofcom the most extraordinary and frankly arbitrary powers? And why is there the establishment under the Act of an elite police force unit to monitor what is said online? So, it's far better to be honest and say we don't have the perfect solutions than to pretend we have with legislation that is a sledgehammer that misses the nut.
Thank you. Mr. Price, the EU's Digital Services Act imposes liability for so-called systemic risks. How does that chill religious or political speech, and do you see conflicts with First Amendment principles?
That's correct. The systemic risk provision, I think, constitutes a form of content moderation that they're misrepresenting, frankly, in their letters to you. And where the systemic risk provisions talk about, in fact, damage to what they call civil discourse. And we've already seen prosecutions, including clients of ours, who have been prosecuted for, among other things, praying silently, discussing the differences between Christianity and Islam, tweeting a verse from the Bible. So if these constitute systemic risks to civil discourse, the EU has the power in terms of this content moderation provision to step in.
Damage to civil discourse seems a little broad, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Mr. Reid, the EU's Digital Markets Act and the UK's Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act are sold as pro-competition, but don't compliance costs just burden small app developers?
Absolutely. The problem is that it's interesting, as you talked about, how do you do a better job? You asked, how do we do a better job to protect children? One of the ways we do it is by empowering parents to be good parents. And one of our deepest concerns is by removing some of the capability of the platforms to curate and provide information to parents about what applications do through a clear, forward interface that they see every day that's useful. It makes it harder to parent, harder to know what apps are on your kid's device, and harder for you to control it. So we absolutely see that not only are there problems with it on encryption, which we agree with you 100%, But we also think it weakens our ability as parents to be in charge of the devices our children are using.
Yeah, these rules don't help parents, consumers, if you will. They just shift power from platforms and from parents and from consumers to regulators, correct?
Correct.
Do these regimes create a level playing field for U.S. firms, or do they advantage European competitors at the expense of American innovation?
Well, the original thought behind the DMA was that Europe had not been successful in creating their own industry, as was alluded to by several other members of Congress, and Congressman Correa noted it as well. Europe's economic potential has slowed while the United States has grown incredibly. We've gone from almost equal in 2008 to a 50% increase in the size of the U.S. economy between 2008 and now. And we think a lot of it comes from the small technology companies that have been creating amazing devices, amazing products, amazing applications that you're all using. And we are disappointed that, that there aren't the same opportunities for the U.S., for our EU members.
Okay, we'll dip out of that Congress hearing again until Nigel Farage comes back up. Mr. Farage is being used intermittently, but they're going off on a bit of a tangent here about American domestic politics. Let's get some reaction from my guests in the studio. I'm joined by Nigel Nelson, our political correspondent, and Catherine Forster. Also, a huge amount to try and pick over. Let's go back to the beginning. Nigel Farage talked about the arrest and the imprisonment of Lucy Connolly. He talked about Graham Linehan being arrested for tweets as an Irishman made in America that got him arrested on British soil. This could happen to any American. He talked about Britain's drift towards what he said was a state more like North Korea. He said the rot began during COVID when totalitarian free speech was imposed from the establishment downwards. He talked about the cancer of non-crime hate incidents, the chaos of them. He talked about the worrying trend of Islamophobia, Islam perhaps getting two-tiered protection from the law. He talks about 2/3 of the British population could be classified as far right now if you define that as being concerned about illegal immigration, border protection and being proud of your flags. He went to the defence of J.K. Rowling on trans matters. An extraordinary outburst from Jamie Raskin, a Democrat opponent who in the summer called Nigel Farage the most pig-headed man he'd ever met. Today, he called him a Putin-loving, free speech imposter. It went on to talk about the fact that this has to be dealt with, and he concluded by saying the silent majority will win. Good will win over evil, common sense and decency will prevail, but it might take some time. A huge amount to unpack there. Catherine Forster, I'm going to come to you first because I think you were at that session, weren't you, back in the summer where Mr. Raskin was in Parliament and he had a blistering row with Nigel Farage. That might explain some of the bad blood today.
Yes, indeed. I was at the first round of this because back, I think it was at the end of July, Nigel Farage chaired a meeting to discuss free speech concerns in our Parliament, and 3 of the Republican congressmen that we've heard today were there. So was the Democrat Jamie Raskin, and there was a very measured, interesting debate. And then when Jamie Raskin started talking about how he says free speech is being suppressed by the president. We know that they're restricting who can go into the Oval Office for press briefings and so on. When he started on that, Nigel Farage said, "We're not here to talk about America. I'm not interested in America." And there was literally a shouting match between them, Jamie Raskin going, "Oh, so you're only interested in free speech when it's free speech you approve of." So there's clearly a lot of bad blood, and I just had a real sense of deja vu. Deja vu
about it. So clearly, no love lost between these two individuals, and it really, really spilled out again today. The hostility was absolutely open and tangible.
Yes, it was. And I interviewed... God, I've totally lost the ability to speak, so I was so done. I interviewed the 3 Republican congressmen afterwards for GBNews. The full interview is on YouTube. And I do think it is fascinating, this tension between keeping children safe online. Yes. We know it's impossible to monitor everything that your children are doing, and we know there's been tragic deaths like Molly Russell, who took her own life. A tension between that and free speech. And of course, we've got to factor in too the interests of big tech companies. These big tech companies, American-owned, hugely influential, a lot of money, and American interests involved in this. But there's definitely a tension, isn't there, between free speech and keeping kids safe. And nobody, it seems, quite yet has found the right balance, perhaps.
OK, thank you very much, Catherine. Nigel, I'll come to you in a moment. I have a guest on the line now I'd like to get to. I'm joined by the Labour MP for Derby North, and that is Catherine Atkinson. Catherine, welcome to the show. Thank you for waiting patiently in the wings there. Sir Keir Starmer early today criticising Nigel Farage for not being at PMQs, as you'd expect. But Nigel Farage over there in Congress, I think, leaving some pretty big headaches for Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, about this absolute bedlam, the chaos of the notion an Irishman making tweets in America can be arrested by 5 armed police officers in London, and sending out a clear message. Nigel Farage said this could happen to anybody in the world. We have a dystopian law system in Britain. What are the Labour Party going to do about it?
Well, I think people will be pretty shocked that we have a UK MP going across to the States to badmouth the UK and to call upon the US to actually threaten serious trade implications against the UK. How is that patriotic? That is actively seeking potential significant damage to our economy. Of course, our country is one where we value free speech. It was the last Labour government that enshrined free speech in the Human Rights Act. So I think that has never meant with free speech that you can say anything that you like. But I think that for a lot of people, they'll be more focused on neighbourhood policing and the fact that we've got an extra 3,000 neighbourhood police on our streets.
Yeah, the trouble with that, though, Catherine Atkinson, is they seem to be deployed to be policing people's tweets and not policing the streets. Now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has woken up to that today, and he's chastised Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, saying, actually get on with your job. But the problem is there's just confusion reigns everywhere. Nobody knows what the law is. Nobody knows what the priority of the law is. We can see people going to jail for Facebook posts, like Lucy Connolly, Graham Linehan being arrested for tweets not even made in this country. It's not even a British citizen. And yet people are being sent to jail for these things, but the Labour Party are releasing violent criminals early. What is the priority of the law and order and the police in this country?
I think that when it comes to the operational independence of the police, it's right that they are operationally independent, and they're the ones that are going to be deciding who is arrested. But I do understand why the Prime Minister was saying that we have priorities on antisocial behaviour and knife crime, and that is why there has been such a focus on increasing the presence of police and increasing neighbourhood policing. And I think that it's absolutely right that there is focus on that. But I do think that, and certainly I personally think that I think people's hearts will go out to the circumstances of Lucy Connolly in losing a child and the impact that had on her. But she pleaded guilty, and that's entirely different than situations where people are found not guilty by a jury of their peers. So I don't think that we should conflate cases that shouldn't be conflated with. But I do think it's important.
Well, Catherine, there's a whole conversation to be had about how people are advised, or how they're badly advised, many people think, to take that guilty plea at a time where I've heard many people who ended up in jail were told they'd get 7 years if they pleaded not guilty. And so a lot of people were terrified into taking a guilty plea. That's a separate conversation. Back to where we are in the here and the now. People are losing faith in law and order, and they're losing faith in the Labour Party's application of law and order. When they're seeing things like Graham Linehan being arrested, it makes an absolute mockery of free speech in this nation. And I put it to you again, it's like people just see the law and order, the police, being applied in a cack-handed, blunderbuss, wrong-headed manner. Non-crime hate incidents seem to be taking precedence over real crimes.
I think I'd have to come back to there needing to be operational independence, but I do agree that we need to ensure that people feel safe on the streets, and neighbourhood policing is such a huge part of that. That is why that has been such a focus of this government, to ensure that we do have that law and order, that people feel safe in their homes and safe on the streets. But I do think that to go abroad and attack our country and attack things that will obviously have an implication on our economics if they're saying that they should be threatening trade sanctions is utterly indefensible.
I think it's worth pointing out, I may have missed it. I've listened to the entire hearing and all the preamble before. I can't find any existence of Nigel Farage specifically calling for trade sanctions or economic impact against Britain. I haven't seen.
He said that there had to be
economic sanctions.
Sorry, if it would help, and I'm just trying to help. He said that there would have to be a frank conversation with the British government and say that if you don't sort this out, it's going to have serious trade implications for both of us. And I think that the idea
could have serious
that you
trade implications because the American government could. I'm afraid we have to interrupt. We have to go back to Nigel Farage. I beg your pardon, Catherine Atkinson.
Speech in America, right, healthy, and what this committee is for. I want to make this argument. Yeah, I know these companies are very big and very powerful, many of the tech firms. But, you know, governments talk to each other, yeah? And it needs the American administration and businesses to have an honest conversation. Brussels, you won't get a hearing. They are fundamentally anti-American, frankly, and I was there for 20 years. I saw it. I do think there is a conversation to be had with the British government about the shape of their legislation and the impact it can have on American individuals, their liberty, and American companies. So I am calling for, as a result of what's happened, it's clearly got the legislation's clearly doing the wrong thing. I think it is cause for proper intergovernmental debate.
I hope that we have it. And by the way, we have censorship in America. Watch ABC, NBC, and CBS. I'm at a meetings. I'm at a discussion. I see and hear what happens. I watch, my wife has Channel 6 on, which drives me nuts at home, and it has nothing to do with the damn stuff that actually happened. And that's the truth. We have it already, and I pray to God we don't lose America. Mr. Chairman, indulgence, and I'll shut up. Mr. Price didn't get a chance.
Quickly.
Yes, sir. You talked about putting pressure on, and I agree that Brussels is a cold house for free speech. But a lot of the regulations actually happening in my own country, in Ireland, in Dublin, where a lot of the tech companies are headquartered, their European headquarters. And it's the Irish Media Commission, or Commission Man in the Irish language, which is the ground zero, really, for a lot of this regulation. And here's where I think the US can do a lot, because there's strong bilateral relationships between Ireland and the United States, is to put pressure on the Irish government to stop the bullying of tech companies. And already X is in the Irish Supreme Court soon against the Irish Media Commissioner. So they're already starting the crackdown. So I would hope that you use your good offices here to put pressure on the Irish.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman is recognized.
Why is the witness leaving this hearing early, and certainly without?
He hasn't engaged me. He told us about this. Is not unusual. It's happened before under Democrat leadership of the committee, under Republican leadership of the committee. We're trying to get through as many people as we can. You've had many of your witnesses who did not ask Mr. Farage a question. Many of your colleagues, if you could have coordinated with them, you didn't go in order. We didn't necessarily go in order because we wanted to get as many people up front asking Mr. Farage questions.
Could we ask him if he would be willing to stay for?
It was totally up to the witness, but if the witness has to go somewhere, I understand. We were glad that he came. We were glad that we had a chance to visit with him in Europe. So you could have went on that trip and had a chance to interact with him.
I wasn't invited, but next time.
Oh, you were definitely invited. Everyone was invited from the Democrat side. The whole committee was invited. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia for questions. And Mr. Farage, if you can stay longer, we would definitely welcome that.
When I chaired this event in the Palace of Westminster, we had an hour for it because time was very tight, and that was perhaps the source of a slight disagreement Mr. Raskin and I had.
A little bit of confusion on that.
We would have given this.
Each side got an hour, but the whole thing was limited to an hour. And then your side went, and then you called it off.
I was given the instructions. This we've given 3 hours, and I apologize, but no, I can't stay longer.
Okay.
I could send the Constitution down to the White House for the president to read it.
The gentleman is not recognized. The gentlelady from Georgia has 5 minutes to ask her questions while Mr. Farage is still here, and then he will leave when he has to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. Our First Amendment rights, as you can see, are definitely under attack. Words are very powerful tools, as you've heard them being used here in this hearing, and this administration has gone out of their way to retaliate against our students, news agencies, and others who express views that don't align with their extreme agenda. By using lawsuits, eliminating funding, and even going so far as to send out a memo with a list of restricted words that can't even be used. The actions of this administration have been ruled against in court time and time again by judges from both parties on a basis of abusing our constitutional rights. From freezing funding for colleges because they do not bend to this administration's will, to removing programs that are designed to expand student understanding and access in education, which I'd like to add, increases future opportunities for our Republican constituents as well, and using federal investigation powers to retaliate. We are watching the First Amendment be manipulated in ways that this nation hoped that they would never see. Hear it from the judges who have ruled against government bullies who attempt to violate the rights of the American people. U.S. District Judge Suknanim found First Amendment violations in the government investigation into media matters, which she stated is likely to succeed in its claim that the FTC was using this investigation as a retaliation against the watchdog group for claims against a prominent Trump supporter. A clear violation of First Amendment protections, and the cases, they just go on and on and on. U.S. District Judge McFadden, a Trump appointee, ordered that the Associated Press's access to the White House press be reinstated, ruling that denying their access because of differing viewpoints was a clear violation of the First Amendment. If the majority wants to talk about attacks on the First Amendment in other parts of the world, they need to start right here in our administration. The Constitution is the foundation of this country. It is not meant to be trampled on for political or for business advantage. When you love something, you want to protect it, and you want to do what's best for it. You want to improve it. This means people will speak out and disagree on actions taken in their country and offer critiques of our leaders.
Okay, Nigel Farage, we believe, is still there. We have another politician grandstanding, going to a bit of a monologue. We'll cut back to that session at Congress if and when Nigel Farage reappears. Let's get back to the studio, some reaction. Nigel Nelson is still here. One of the things that leapt out, and you haven't had a chance to respond to this yet, was earlier on in the session when Nigel Farage was asked when he believed this switch, this change happened towards a more totalitarian approach towards free speech. He said COVID changed the game. Arguments needed to be made, but couldn't be made. And a lot of people, Nigel Nelson, felt that was the case. The establishment, the media, politicians, all of them, by the way, we didn't have an active opposition at the time. They all agreed no questioning of COVID, of lockdowns, of vaccines was necessary or allowed, and you disagree with that?
I do. It was an emergency. There were obviously going to be different restraints as there would be in wartime. When COVID started, all we had was the same medieval mitigations that they used back then: lockdowns, quarantine, social distancing, and so on. The vaccines made a huge difference. It was quite right to stop. Well, yes, it did, because I don't think we'd have got out of COVID in the same way without the vaccines. Now, the problem was that the people who were anti-vaxxers could have stopped that program in its tracks through social media. It's understandable that the government, taking emergency powers, did something about that.
So you still maintain that all of that, despite what we know now about the usefulness of vaccines, we don't want to go down a COVID rabbit hole here, but back to the point of free speech. Nigel Farage said it gave authoritarians a taste for control and power. That's what he was implying, and many people think that was carried through to non-crime incidents, taking us to Lucy Connolly and Graham Linehan.
Well, I mean, you could argue the Second World War started it. There were restraints then. Whenever there's an emergency going on, the government takes emergency powers. That's what happened during COVID. That's what happens during wartime. Those emergency powers have subsequently disappeared, and people can criticise the vaccine as much as they like.
Catherine Force, I want to get a quick nibble from you before we end the show. This now lands in the in tray of Yvette Cooper. Nigel Farage has been overseas talking about free speech here. Mark Rowley was chastised today by the Prime Minister. Nobody seems to have a Scooby-Doo what to do with the law, how to impose it, and this now surely needs intervention from Yvette Cooper.
Yes, you wonder what will happen next, because it's not just Graham Lineman, it's not just Lucy Connolly. We see over and over again, we get these stories in the press. There was one a couple of months ago that was in the Times about people who'd been criticising a teacher in a WhatsApp chat, a parent's WhatsApp chat, had police arriving at their doorstep. It clearly has gone far, far, far too far. But I'm just fascinated by the change that we've had and how people used to get really, really cross if politicians from one country sort of interfered in another country's. I was just looking at Nigel Farage's Twitter. He's put a picture of him arriving at Congress, and there are many, many people that think that he should be there, that this is a critical issue and that this is absolutely essential. But there's lots of other people retweeting that and going, why are you not in Parliament? Parliament's back. Why are you not in Clacton?
OK, well, Nigel Farage is there giving his summing up. This will continue on Jubes & Co. The Queen of Primetime Debate will pick this up. That's next. And I'm back with Farage at 7 p.m. See you then.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M40 northbound, entry at junction 15 is blocked due to a collision causing delays. In Kent, the M25 clockwise at junction 1B has an incident closing one of 4 lanes, causing a 50-minute delay. Motorists in northeast Lincolnshire on the A180 eastbound face congestion between the A1 136